She was just the cleaning lady to them, until she walked into the Billionaire's party dressed like a queen with her daughter. Luna Rhodes stood at the entrance of the Grandview Hotel, her hand wrapped around her, daughter's small fingers staring at the river of wealth flowing through golden doors. The emerald silk of her dress caught the glow from 1,000 lights, transforming her into someone she'd forgotten she could be. Beside her, 5-year-old Claire bounced on her toes, mesmerized by the red carpet that stretched before them like a promise. "Mama, look, it's like a movie," Claire whispered, her grey-blue eyes, his eyes, sparkling with wonder. Luna's heart hammered against her ribs. 3 years. For 3 years, she'd walked the corridors of Vanguard Industries, wiping down surfaces, emptying trash bins, polishing floors that reflected the lives of people who never once looked at her face. Not really. Their gazes would skim past her blue uniform, past her name tag, past the exhaustion carved into her shoulders. She was background noise, a function, the woman who made their world spotless while remaining permanently erased from their consciousness. Have you ever been invisible? Not ignored. Invisible. The kind where you could vanish tomorrow, and the only thing anyone would notice is that the coffee station wasn't restocked or the conference room smelled slightly off. That was Luna's existence at Vanguard Industries, scrubbing the floors of a corporation where her daughter's father climbed higher and higher up the executive ladder, completely unaware that he had a child. Before we go any further, I need to pause and say thank you. Thanks to your incredible support, this channel just crossed 1,000 subscribers. And that milestone belongs to all of you who keep coming back for these stories. If what you're about to hear gives you chills, if Luna's journey speaks to you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that like button, drop a comment about what you're feeling, and subscribe to Mr. Steele. Rich stories for more narratives that remind us all that invisible doesn't mean powerless. Now, back to Luna. Tonight was different. Tonight, she wasn't wearing the shapeless uniform that had become her second skin. Tonight, she'd spent money she didn't have on a dress that hugged curves she'd forgotten existed. The emerald silk had cost her 3 months of careful saving, the kind of saving where you buy generic cereal and skip meals so your daughter never notices the budget tightening. The diamond earrings dangling from her ears were borrowed from Mrs. Patterson next door, a 70-year-old widow who'd insisted Luna needed proper armor for whatever battle she was marching into. "You look like a queen," Mrs. Patterson had said that evening, fastening the clasp of the second earring with trembling fingers. "Go show them who you really are." Luna hadn't told Mrs. Patterson the full truth. How could she explain that the man who'd left her pregnant and alone 6 years ago worked in the building where she mopped floors? How could she articulate the particular torture of cleaning his office every Thursday night, of smelling his cologne, lingering in the air, of seeing framed photos of corporate achievements on walls she dusted with careful hands? Mrs. Patterson knew Luna was a single mother working hard to build something better. She didn't know that something better had started as survival and evolved into quiet, methodical revenge. Claire tugged her hand. "Are we going in? My feet hurt in these fancy shoes." Luna looked down at her daughter, the miracle she'd built her entire life around. Claire wore a miniature version of Luna's dress, emerald silk with tiny silver stars, embroidered across the skirt because her daughter loved anything that caught light. At 5 years old, Claire could read chapter books that children twice her age struggled with. She asked questions that made adults pause and reconsider their answers. She had Logan Price's stubborn chin, his quick mind, his tendency to tilt her head slightly when concentrating on a problem. Logan had no idea she existed. "Yes, baby, we're going inside." Luna squeezed Claire's hand and took the first step forward. The cleaning lady at Vanguard Industries was about to crash the Billionaire's Gala. But what the executives sipping champagne behind those doors didn't know, what they couldn't possibly understand, was that the woman they'd overlooked for 3 years was about to change everything. Luna's life at Vanguard Industries had been a masterclass in becoming unseen. She'd perfected the art of being present but ignored, necessary but dismissible. The executives would have meetings in conference rooms while she emptied trash cans 6 feet away, discussing mergers and acquisitions, and quarterly projections as if she were a lamp or a potted plant. They'd talk about their vacation homes in Aspen, their children's private school tuition, their frustrations with staff who didn't meet expectations. Luna would wipe down tables still warm from their coffee cups and absorb every word. Information was power. Luna had been collecting it like currency for 3 years. She knew which departments were hemorrhaging money. She knew which vice presidents were having affairs with their assistants. She knew about the upcoming contract negotiations that would determine Vanguard's expansion into the West Coast. She knew that Gerald Hastings, the CEO who ran Vanguard Industries with an iron fist, disguised as paternal concern, had been pushing Logan Price towards suitable relationships for the past 2 years. Most importantly, 2 weeks ago, she'd learned something that had set tonight's events into motion. Luna had been replacing air fresheners in the executive wing when Gerald Hastings' voice had carried through his partially open office door. He'd been on a call, his tone clipped with frustration. "The Price situation is untenable," Gerald had said. "Ever since that woman showed up claiming to have his child, Logan's been distracted. I had our lawyers handle it, of course. The paternity test proved the child wasn't his. But it shook him. He keeps saying things like, 'What if there were others, and what if I missed something important?' It's affecting his performance." Luna had frozen in the hallway, her pulse pounding in her ears. Another woman had come forward claiming Logan had a child. When? And, more importantly, if the claim was false, why had Logan been so affected by it? She'd lingered, adjusting magazines that didn't need adjusting, straining to hear more. "That's why I've arranged for Miranda Colton to be seated next to him at the gala," Gerald had continued. "Good family, excellent connections, sharp business mind. It's time." Logan stopped dwelling on the past and focused on building the right future. "I'll have this settled by the end of the evening." The call had ended. Luna had finished her rounds in a haze, her mind racing with possibilities she'd spent 6 years trying to suppress. Logan had been approached by someone claiming to have his child. The claim had been false, but it had cracked something open in him. He was questioning, wondering, asking what if, and Gerald Hastings, the man who Luna suspected had intercepted her desperate letter 6 years ago, was now orchestrating Logan's personal life like a puppet master pulling strings. The fury had built slowly at first, then all at once. 6 years of silence. 6 years of accepting that she'd been rejected, that she hadn't mattered enough, that Logan Price had chosen to believe she was some opportunist trying to trap him. 6 years of biting her tongue while scrubbing his flaws. The anger crystallized into something sharp and useful. She would go to that gala. She would walk through those doors on her own terms, and she would do it with Claire beside her, living, breathing proof that Luna Rhodes had built a beautiful life without Logan Price's acknowledgement, approval, or financial support. Now, standing at the hotel entrance with her daughter's hand in hers, Luna felt the weight of that decision pressing against her chest. The valet was already moving toward their car, a hired sedan that had cost half a week's wages. Through the glass doors, she could see the glittering crowd, the chandeliers dripping, crystal light, the orchestra playing something classical and expensive sounding. Somewhere in that ballroom, Logan Price was probably sitting next to Miranda Colton, being guided toward a future that had been planned without his input. Somewhere in there, Gerald Hastings was congratulating himself on protecting his protégé from messy complications. They had no idea Luna was coming. "Mama, you're squeezing too tight," Claire said softly. Luna loosened her grip, forcing air back into her lungs. "Sorry, sweetheart. Just nervous." "Why?" "You look really pretty. Everybody's going to think you're a princess. If only it were that simple. If only Luna could believe that walking through those doors in an expensive dress would erase 3 years of being overlooked. 6 years of being forgotten. A lifetime of learning that the world didn't care about women who struggled alone. But this wasn't about being seen as pretty. This wasn't even about Logan, not entirely. This was about Luna proving to herself that she existed, that she mattered, that the woman in the blue janitor's uniform and the woman in the emerald silk dress were the same person, and both versions deserved respect. "You're right," Luna said, straightening her shoulders. "I do look pretty, and you look beautiful. Ready?" Claire nodded, her expression turning serious in that way children do when they sense their parents need them to be brave. Together, they walked toward the entrance. The doorman, a young man in an immaculate uniform, opened the door with a professional smile that faltered slightly when he looked at Luna. Recognition flickered across his face. He'd probably seen her leaving the building late at night, pushing a cleaning cart, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. "Good evening," Luna said calmly, meeting his eyes with the same directness she'd use if she belonged here. "Good evening, Mum," he replied, recovering quickly. His gaze dropped to Claire, and his smile warmed. "And good evening to you too, young lady." "Good evening," Claire chirped. "I like your fancy coat." They stepped into the lobby, and the world transformed. The Grandview Hotel had been decorated within an inch of its life, white flowers cascading. From every available surface, ice sculptures catching light from chandeliers. The size of small cars, waiters gliding between clusters of guests with trays of champagne, and hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more than Luna's weekly grocery budget. Claire's grip tightened on Luna's hand, suddenly overwhelmed by the spectacle. "It's okay," Luna murmured. "Just people in fancy clothes, same as us." But they weren't the same, and Luna knew it. These people belonged to a world of inherited wealth and strategic marriages and business degrees from universities, where a single semester cost more than Luna had made in her entire first year as a cleaning lady. They spoke a language of summer homes and charity boards and small investments that would change Luna's life completely. Luna had been one of them once, briefly. 6 years ago, she'd walked into this exact hotel on Logan's Arm, wearing a silver dress and naive hope. She'd believed that education and ambition were enough, that love could bridge any gap, that the man who'd whispered promises against her skin actually meant them. She'd been wrong about almost everything back then. But she wasn't wrong anymore. Luna had spent 6 years learning exactly how the world worked. She'd watched from the margins, while people with power made decisions that affected lives they'd never bother to understand. She'd seen executives destroy departments with budget cuts while discussing their ski trips. She'd observed the machinery of privilege operating smoothly because people like her kept it oiled and polished. Tonight, she was stepping back into that world, not as a guest this time, not even as a gatecrasher, really. As a reminder that dismissed people still exist, that overlooked women still have voices, that the cleaning lady scrubbing your floors might be building an empire in her spare time. Luna had done exactly that. Green Solutions had started as a blog she'd written during Claire's nap times, researching eco-friendly cleaning products because she'd been frustrated by the harsh chemicals Vanguard Industries insisted on using. The blog had gained followers, other parents concerned about toxic substances, small business owners looking for sustainable options, facilities managers tired of vendors who didn't care about environmental impact. Within a year, Luna had turned the blog into a consulting service. Within 2 years, she'd secured her first 3 clients. Last month, everything had changed. A commercial property developer had been impressed by her pitch for comprehensive eco-friendly building maintenance. They'd offered her a contract that would triple her income and give her the stability to quit Vanguard Industries forever. But more than that, they'd mentioned another opportunity. They were looking for a partner to help them pitch a major account. A building management contract for a corporation that owned multiple high-rises downtown. Vanguard Industries owned those high-rises. The irony was delicious. Luna Rhodes, the dismissed cleaning lady, might soon be competing for contracts with the company where she currently scrubbed toilets. Green Solutions might become Vanguard's vendor, which would mean Luna would walk into board meetings as a business owner, not a janitor. She'd sit across from executives who'd looked through her for 3 years and negotiate terms as an equal. Let them see what the overlooked woman had built in the shadows. But first, there was tonight. First, there was this moment, walking across the Grandview Hotel lobby with Claire, his hand in hers, feeling eyes beginning to turn, whispers starting to circulate. "Is that... Who is she? Wait, isn't she..." Luna kept her chin high and her pace steady. The ballroom entrance loomed ahead, framed by white flowers and more of those ridiculous ice sculptures. Through the open doors, she could see the crowd, hundreds of people in tuxedos and evening gowns, networking and laughing, and performing the elaborate dance of social hierarchy. Her heart was trying to hammer its way out of her chest. Her palms were sweating despite the hotel's aggressive air conditioning. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around, take Claire home, forget this foolish plan. But Luna had spent 3 years being unseen. She was done disappearing to make other people comfortable. She crossed the threshold into the ballroom, and the noise hit her like a wave, conversation and music and the clink of crystal. Claire pressed closer to her side, suddenly shy in the face of so many strangers. "It's okay," Luna repeated, as much for herself as for her daughter. "We belong here." Did they? Luna wasn't sure anymore, but she was here, and she was going to see this through. The ballroom was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the city skyline. Round tables draped in white linen filled the space, each one surrounded by people who looked like they'd been born knowing which fork to use for which course. A live orchestra played near the dance floor, where a few couples were already swaying to something slow and classical. Luna scanned the crowd, searching for a familiar face among the sea of strangers. And then, there, Logan Price stood near the bar, his tall frame unmistakable even from across the room. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo that probably cost more than Luna's monthly rent. His dark hair was styled with just enough deliberate messiness to look effortless. Even from this distance, Luna could see the sharp line of his jaw, the broad shoulders that had once made her feel safe. Next to him stood a woman, blonde, elegant, laughing at something Logan had said. Miranda Colton, probably. Gerald Hastings' carefully selected candidate for Logan's future. As if sensing her stare, Logan glanced up. Their eyes met across the crowded ballroom. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Logan's expression went blank with shock, his champagne glass freezing halfway to his lips. Luna watched confusion move across his face, followed by something that looked like he was trying to place her, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. His gaze dropped to Claire, still clinging to Luna's hand. Luna saw the moment his brain began making connections, registering the small figure. Beside her, the matching emerald dresses, the way Claire's hand fit into Luna's. Then his eyes returned to Luna's face, and this time there was recognition. Not immediate, not certain, but dawning. The context of the gala, 6 years ago. A woman he'd spent one night with. Luna's face, older now but unmistakable when he actually looked at her. Really looked. Without the filter of a janitor's uniform and 3 years of trained dismissal. Luna lifted her chin slightly, meeting his stare with her own. She didn't smile, didn't nod, just let him look at them, at the life he'd rejected 6 years ago, now standing in the same ballroom where they'd first met. Then she turned away, guiding Claire toward the closest table, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone in the room must hear it. The overlooked woman had become visible, and the night was only beginning. 6 years ago, Luna Thorne had been a completely different person. At 23, she'd walked across the graduation stage at Hamilton Business School with her MBA diploma in hand and fire burning in her chest. The world had felt wide open, full of possibilities she could almost taste. Her classmates had thrown their caps in the air while parents cheered from bleachers packed with pride and expensive cameras. Luna's mother had been there too, wiping tears and clutching a bouquet of roses she'd probably spent too much money on. "You did it, baby," her mother had whispered, pulling Luna into a tight hug that smelled like the lavender perfume she'd worn for as long as Luna could remember. "First person in our family to get a graduate degree. Your father would be so proud." Luna's father had died when she was 16, a heart attack that had come without warning and left behind medical bills that swallowed their savings. Her mother had worked 2 jobs to keep Luna in school, refusing to let her daughter's dreams die with her husband. That MBA represented more than Luna's achievement. It was proof that sacrifice meant something. That hard work could actually change a family's trajectory. Luna had believed that completely back then. She'd walked out of graduation with job applications already submitted, to 3 major corporations, recommendation letters from professors who'd praised her strategic thinking and a confidence born from never having failed at anything she'd truly tried to accomplish. She'd been naive in the way that young people with good grades and supportive parents often are, believing that merit mattered. Most, that talent would be recognized, that the playing field was level enough if you just worked harder than everyone else. The summer after graduation had been filled with interviews and waiting. Luna had taken a temporary position at a marketing firm to pay bills while she waited for the real opportunities to materialize. She'd lived in a cramped studio apartment with a Murphy bed and a window that overlooked a brick wall, but it had been hers. She'd decorated it with thrift store furniture and plants from the farmers market, building a life that felt like the beginning of something bigger. Then came the invitation to Vanguard Industries' summer gala. One of Luna's professors, Dr. Patricia Williamson, who'd taught her strategic management course, had connections to the company through her husband. She'd offered Luna a +1 invitation, suggesting it would be good networking. Vanguard Industries is growing fast, Dr. Williamson had said, handing Luna the embossed invitation. They're always looking for bright young minds. Go, make connections. Let people see what you're capable of. You never know where it might lead. Luna had accepted gratefully, spending money she shouldn't have on a silver dress from a consignment shop. The dress had been beautiful, simple but elegant, with thin straps and a flowing skirt that caught light like water. She'd felt transformed when she'd put it on. No longer the scrappy scholarship student, but someone who could hold her own in rooms full of wealth and power. The Grandview Hotel had been just as elaborate 6 years ago. Luna remembered walking through those same doors, clutching a small silver purse and trying not to look as overwhelmed as she felt. Dr. Williamson had introduced her to several people, executives with firm handshakes and business cards, their spouses making polite conversation about weather and vacation plans. Luna had smiled until her face hurt, trying to memorize names and company positions, hoping someone would remember her when she submitted applications. Then she'd seen Logan Price across the room. He'd been standing near the windows, silhouetted against the city lights, talking with an older gentleman Luna would later learn was Gerald Hastings. Even from a distance, Logan had commanded attention. He was tall, easily 6'2", with dark hair and a jawline that belonged in magazine advertisements. But it wasn't his looks that had caught Luna's attention. It was the way he carried himself, confident but not arrogant, present but not performing. He'd laughed at something Gerald said, and the sound had been genuine, reaching his eyes, in a way that suggested he actually enjoyed the conversation, rather than enduring it. Dr. Williamson had noticed Luna staring. "That's Logan Price," she'd said quietly. "Heir to the Price family fortune, though he's determined to prove himself on his own merits. Just been promoted to junior vice president at Vanguard. Smart, driven, and according to my husband, genuinely decent. A rare combination in this world." Luna had forced herself to look away, feeling foolish for gawking like a teenager at a celebrity. She'd come here to network professionally, not to develop a crush on some wealthy executive who was completely out of her league. Except Logan had looked up at that exact moment, and their eyes had met across the crowded ballroom. He'd smiled, not the polite, distant smile people gave strangers at formal events, but something warmer, more curious. Then he'd excused himself from Gerald and walked directly toward her. Luna's heart had performed gymnastics in her chest. "Hi," Logan had said when he reached her, extending his hand. "I'm Logan. I don't think we've met." His handshake had been firm but not aggressive. His eyes, that particular shade of grey-blue that changed depending on the light, had focused on her face with an intensity that made her forget every prepared networking line she'd practiced. "Luna," she'd managed. "Luna Thorne. I just graduated from Hamilton Business School. An MBA." Logan's smile had widened. "What's your concentration?" They'd started talking, and the rest of the gala had faded into background noise. Logan had been interested in her thesis on sustainable business practices in mid-sized corporations. He'd asked intelligent questions, challenged her assumptions in ways that felt engaging, rather than dismissive, and listened like her answers actually mattered. They'd debated supply chain ethics and discussed emerging markets and argued about whether corporate social responsibility was genuine or just sophisticated marketing. Hours had passed without Luna noticing. At some point, they'd moved to a quieter corner of the ballroom. Logan had brought her champagne and appetizers from passing trays. He'd told her about growing up under the pressure of family expectations, about his determination to earn his position at Vanguard rather than having it handed to him, about his frustration with executives who prioritized quarterly profits over long-term sustainability. "Everyone assumes my last name got me here," Logan had said, his expression shadowed with frustration, "and maybe it opened the door. But I've worked twice as hard to prove I deserve to stay. Gerald Hastings is one of the few who seems to judge me on actual performance rather than pedigree." Luna had understood that pressure in a different way. She'd carried the weight of being the first in her family to achieve certain milestones. The responsibility of honoring her mother's sacrifices and her father's memory. They'd connected over that shared understanding, the burden of trying to prove yourself worthy of opportunities, even if the starting points were vastly different. As the evening wore on, the connection had deepened into something Luna hadn't expected. Logan had made her laugh with stories about disastrous corporate retreats. She'd challenged him on blind spots in his thinking. They'd discovered shared tastes in books and music. The attraction had been undeniable, a magnetic pull that made Luna's skin feel too warm and her thoughts scatter whenever Logan's hand brushed hers. When the gala finally ended, Logan had offered to drive her home. Luna had accepted, too caught up in the moment to worry about propriety or professional boundaries. They'd talked the entire drive, the conversation flowing as easily as it had all evening. When Logan had parked outside her building, he'd turned to her with an expression that made Luna's breath catch. "I know this might be going forward," he'd said carefully, "but I don't want tonight to end. Would you like to come up for coffee? I promise I actually mean coffee. I just want to keep talking to you." Luna had hesitated for exactly 3 seconds before saying yes. They'd climbed the narrow stairs to Luna's studio apartment, and she'd been suddenly self-conscious about the cramped space, the second-hand furniture, the fact that her kitchen was basically a hot plate and a mini-fridge, but Logan hadn't seemed to notice or care. He'd looked around with genuine interest, commenting on the books stacked on her makeshift shelves, admiring the plants she'd cultivated on the windowsill. Luna had made coffee, actual coffee, despite her earlier assumption that coffee had been code for something else. They'd sat on her small couch, knees touching, continuing conversations that had started hours earlier at the gala. The city lights filtered through her window, casting soft shadows across Logan's face. "Can I be honest about something?" Logan had asked, setting down his coffee cup. "Please. I'm not usually like this. I don't usually connect with people this quickly. My life is mostly board meetings and quarterly reviews, and trying to prove I'm more than my last name. But tonight, with you, I feel like I can just be myself." "Does that sound ridiculous?" "No," Luna had whispered. "It sounds exactly how I feel." Logan had reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture had been tender, questioning, giving Luna space to pull away if she wanted. She hadn't wanted to. Instead, she'd leaned closer, and Logan had kissed her. The kiss had been gentle at first, almost careful. Then it had deepened into something more urgent. Luna had felt herself falling into it, into him, into the possibility of something real and meaningful. They'd moved from the couch to her Murphy bed, shedding clothes and inhibitions. Logan had been attentive, generous, making sure Luna felt safe and wanted. The connection between them had been electric, transformative, the kind of physical intimacy that felt like it meant something beyond the moment. Afterward, they'd lain tangled together in Luna's narrow bed, Logan's arm around her shoulders, Luna's head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slowly. They'd talked until dawn, about their hopes, their fears, their dreams for the future. Logan had traced lazy patterns on Luna's skin and told her about his plans to eventually shift Vanguard Industries toward more sustainable practices. Luna had shared her ideas about building a consulting firm that helped mid-sized businesses implement ethical supply chains. "I want to see you again," Logan had said, as the sun started painting her brick wall view with soft pink light. "Not just professionally. I mean, yes, professionally too. You should definitely apply to Vanguard. But personally, I want to take you to dinner. I want to introduce you to people. I want to keep having conversations like this." "I'd like that," Luna had replied, her heart full of hope that felt almost painful in its intensity. Logan had kissed her again, slower this time, like he was memorizing the taste of her. "I have to fly to Chicago this week for a conference, but I'll call you as soon as I'm back. We'll make plans, real plans." He'd left shortly after, with one last lingering kiss at her door. Luna had watched him walk down the stairs, already missing him, already counting hours until they'd see each other again. That had been the night Claire was conceived. That night of connection and promise and hope. It had also been the last time Luna saw Logan Price for 6 years. The first few days after the gala, Luna had floated through life in a haze of anticipation. She'd checked her phone constantly, waiting for Logan's call. She'd replayed their conversations in her mind, analyzing every word for evidence that the connection had been as real as it felt. She'd even allowed herself to fantasize about where this might lead. A relationship, maybe, with someone who actually saw her, who valued her mind as much as her body. By day 4, the anticipation had started curdling into anxiety. Logan had said he'd call when he returned from Chicago. Maybe the conference was running long? Maybe he'd been swamped with work immediately upon return. By day 7, Luna had broken down and called the number Logan had programmed into her phone that night. It had rung 3 times before switching to an automated message. "The number you have reached is no longer in service." Luna had stared at her phone, confusion morphing into cold dread. Disconnected? Why would Logan disconnect his number? She'd tried again, thinking she'd misdialed. Same message. She'd sent an email to the address on the business card he'd given her. It had bounced back as undeliverable. Panic had set in. Has something happened to him? An accident? An emergency? Luna had spent an entire evening searching online for news about Logan Price, finding nothing except his professional biography on Vanguard Industries' website and a few mentions in business journals. Finally, desperate and worried, Luna had gone to Vanguard Industries in person. She'd dressed professionally, rehearsing what she'd say. She just needed to know he was okay. That was all. Just confirmation that Logan was alive and safe. The security guard at the front desk had looked at her with barely concealed skepticism when she'd asked to see Logan Price. "Do you have an appointment?" the guard had asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer. "No, but—" "Mr. Price doesn't see anyone without an appointment. Could you just call up to his office? Tell him Luna Thorne is here. He'll want to—" "Ma'am, I'm not calling anyone. If you don't have an appointment, you need to leave." Luna had persisted, explaining that she was a friend, that Logan would want to know she was there. The guard's expression had shifted from skepticism to something closer to pity mixed with disgust. "Listen," he'd said, lowering his voice. "You're not the first woman to come here with a story about knowing Mr. Price personally. We get 1 or 2 a month. The answer is always the same. No appointment, no access. Now please leave before I have to call additional security." The humiliation had burned through Luna's chest like acid. She'd left the building with her cheeks flaming, trying to process what had just happened. The guard thought she was some kind of stalker, some delusional woman inventing a connection that didn't exist. But it had existed. Luna knew it had. The conversations, the connection, the night they'd spent together, all of it had been real, hadn't it? 2 months after the gala, Luna's period was 3 weeks late. She'd taken a pregnancy test in the cramped bathroom of her studio apartment, hands shaking so badly she'd almost dropped it. The 2 pink lines had appeared immediately, stark and undeniable against the white plastic. Pregnant. Luna had slid down the bathroom wall until she was sitting on the cold tile floor, staring at those 2 lines and trying to process what they meant. She was pregnant with Logan Price's child, the man who'd disappeared from her life without explanation, the man whose number was disconnected, whose emails bounced back, whose security team treated her like a delusional stalker. For 3 days, Luna had existed in a state of numb shock. She'd gone through the motions of her temporary job, smiled at co-workers, eaten meals she didn't taste. At night, she'd lie in bed with her hand on her still flat stomach, trying to decide what to do. Finally, she'd made a decision. Logan deserved to know, regardless of why he'd disappeared, regardless of how humiliating it was. To reach out again, he had a right to know he was going to be a father. And Luna needed help. Her temporary job barely covered rent and food. She had no family besides her mother, who was already struggling financially. She couldn't do this alone. Luna had spent an entire evening crafting a letter. She'd written and rewritten it a dozen times, trying to find the right words. How did you tell someone you'd spent one night with that you were carrying their child? How did you explain that you weren't trying to trap them or extort them, that you just needed acknowledgement and support? The final version was 3 pages long. Luna had explained everything: the pregnancy, her situation, her genuine confusion about why Logan had disappeared. She'd included her address, her phone number, her email. She'd even included a copy of the positive pregnancy test, feeling simultaneously desperate and pathetic for needing to provide proof. She'd mailed the letter to Vanguard Industries, addressed to Logan Price personally, marked private and confidential. Then she'd waited. 3 weeks later, the letter had come back. The envelope was still sealed, return to sender stamped across the front. Attached to it was a single sheet of expensive cardstock with a typed message. Mr. Price is engaged to be married and requests no further contact. Any additional attempts to reach him will be considered harassment and handled accordingly. Luna had read those words 5 times before the meaning fully sank in. Engaged to be married. Logan was engaged. The night they'd spent together, the connection she'd thought was real, the promises he'd made, all of it had been lies. Or maybe not lies. Maybe just casual entertainment for a man who was already committed to someone else. The request for no further contact wasn't even the cruelest part. It was the threat hidden in that last sentence. Any additional attempts would be considered harassment. Luna was being warned. Stay away or face consequences. The letter had broken something fundamental inside Luna. Not just her heart, though that had certainly shattered. It was deeper than that. Logan's rejection had cracked open every insecurity Luna had ever felt about not being good enough, not coming from the right family, not having the right connections. She'd believed that her education and intelligence and work ethic would be enough. That merit mattered. That genuine connection could transcend social boundaries. Luna had looked at Logan and seen a man who valued her mind, who listened to her ideas, who made her feel seen and important. She'd been wrong about all of it. The humiliation was crushing. Luna had given herself to someone who'd viewed her as temporary entertainment. She'd opened up about her dreams and fears to someone who'd apparently been engaged to someone else the entire time. She'd been so stupid, so naive, so willing to believe that a man like Logan Price could actually want someone like her for more than one night. How had she been so wrong about him? The warmth in his eyes when they'd talked, the genuine interest he'd shown in her work, the tenderness in how he'd touched her. Had all of it been performance? Was Logan that good at deception, or was Luna just that desperate to believe she mattered? The questions circled in her mind for weeks, eroding her confidence and her trust in her own judgment. If she could be that wrong about Logan, what else was she wrong about? Her career prospects? Her abilities? Her understanding of how the world worked? Luna had always prided herself on being smart and perceptive. The realization that she'd completely misread a situation this important made her question everything else she thought she knew. At her first prenatal appointment, the doctor had confirmed what Luna already knew. She was pregnant, about 12 weeks along. Everything looked healthy. The baby was due in early spring. Do you have support? The doctor had asked, her tone carefully neutral. Partner, family, friends. My mother, Luna had replied. She'll help. It was true, but barely. Luna's mother lived 3 hours away in a small town Luna had moved, away from the moment she'd received her college acceptance letter. Her mother worked full-time managing a grocery store and barely scraped by herself. She couldn't provide financial support, and she couldn't move to the city to help with childcare. Luna was essentially alone. That night, she'd made a decision that would define the next 6 years of her life. She wouldn't try to contact Logan again. She wouldn't beg for recognition or support from a man who'd made his position painfully clear. She would raise this baby herself, on her own terms, without depending on anyone who'd already rejected them both. Pride played a role in that decision. Luna refused to humiliate herself further by begging for scraps of attention from Logan Price. But it was more than pride. It was self-preservation. The letter's threat of harassment charges had terrified her. What if she kept trying and Logan's lawyers got involved? What if she ended up with legal problems that made it even harder to find work and provide for her child? Better to walk away completely. Better to build a life that didn't require anything from the man who'd thrown her away. The pregnancy had made job hunting nearly impossible. Luna had continued applying for positions that matched her MBA qualifications, but something always seemed to derail the process. Sometimes it was morning sickness that made her cancel interviews. Sometimes it was the visible baby bump that appeared by her second trimester, making hiring managers suddenly remember they'd already filled the position. By her 7th month, Luna had stopped pretending she'd land a career track job before the baby arrived. She'd taken whatever work she could get: data entry, retail, waitressing at a diner that didn't care if she wore loose shirts to hide her growing stomach. None of it used her education. All of it barely paid bills. Her savings had evaporated with terrifying speed. Prenatal appointments, even with basic insurance, weren't free. She'd needed maternity clothes. She'd tried to prepare for the baby: crib, car seat, diapers, bottles. Every purchase had felt like choosing between necessities, deciding which items she could live without or find second-hand. The MBA she'd worked so hard for became irrelevant. The diploma sat in a box in her closet, a reminder of dreams that no longer fit her reality. Luna had planned to be climbing corporate ladders, making strategic decisions, proving herself in boardrooms. Instead, she was 7 months pregnant, working double shifts at a diner, and living in a studio apartment that was definitely too small for a baby. Her dreams compressed into something much simpler and much harder: survive, keep the baby healthy, find a way to pay rent, don't think about everything you've lost. Luna had given birth to Claire on a cold March morning, alone except for a nurse who held her hand during contractions. Her mother had tried to come, but couldn't afford to take time off work. Logan Price didn't know his daughter existed. Luna's friends from graduate school had drifted away, uncomfortable with her changed circumstances. But when they'd placed Claire in Luna's arms, tiny and perfect and crying with impressive lung capacity, none of that had mattered. Luna had looked at her daughter and felt a fierce, overwhelming love that redefined everything. This was her family now. This small person depends entirely on her. Luna would do whatever it took to give Claire a good life, even if it meant scrubbing floors in the building where Claire's father worked, even if it meant being dismissed for years, even if it meant carrying a wound that never fully healed. The past had shaped Luna into someone harder and stronger than the naive 23-year-old in the silver dress. But standing in the Grandview Hotel ballroom 6 years later, watching Logan Price stare at her and Claire with shock written across his face, Luna felt that old wound tear open fresh and bleeding. Some betrayals never stopped hurting. They just taught you how to function while bleeding. 3 years ago, Luna had been standing in her kitchen at 2 in the morning, staring at a stack of overdue bills while Claire slept in the next room. The electricity bill was marked final notice in angry red letters. The rent was due in 3 days, and Luna was short by $200. Her checking account had $37 left after she'd bought groceries and diapers. The math wasn't working, no matter how many times she recalculated. Claire had just turned 2 years old. She was in that phase where toddlers become tiny tornadoes of energy and curiosity, requiring constant attention and seemingly endless supplies. Shoes that fit 1 month were too small the next. Clothes wore out from constant washing. Daycare cost nearly as much as Luna's rent, but she couldn't work without it. Luna had been piecing together income from 3 part-time jobs: morning shifts at a coffee shop, afternoon data, entry work she could sometimes do from home during Claire's naps, and evening inventory counting at a warehouse. None of the jobs offered benefits. None paid enough individually. Together, they barely kept Luna and Claire afloat, and only if nothing unexpected happened. Something unexpected always happens. That month, it had been Claire's ear infection, the urgent care visit, the prescription antibiotics, the 2 days Luna had to miss work because Claire was feverish and miserable. It had created a gap in their already precarious finances that Luna couldn't close. She'd applied for better positions constantly. Every job posting that matched even part of her qualifications received her resume. But employers saw the 2-year employment gap and made assumptions. Or they'd schedule interviews during hours when Luna couldn't find childcare. Or they'd move forward with candidates who didn't have a toddler who might need sudden sick days. Luna's MBA had become an expensive piece of paper that mostly made her overqualified for jobs she could actually get. Nobody wanted to hire someone with a graduate degree for entry-level positions. They assumed Luna would leave the moment something better came along. They were probably right. That night, surrounded by bills she couldn't pay and the sleeping sounds of a daughter who deserved so much better, Luna had done what she'd sworn she'd never do. She'd opened her laptop and searched for jobs she'd previously considered beneath her education level. Retail management, administrative assistant, customer service. The cleaning position at Vanguard Industries had appeared in her search results almost like fate mocking her. Night shift custodial services, $15 hour, benefits after 90 days, immediate opening. Luna had stared at that listing for 10 full minutes, her cursor hovering over the link. Vanguard Industries, Logan Price's company. The building where Luna had been turned away by security, treated like a delusional stalker, warned against harassment. The idea of working there made her stomach turn. But the pay was better than her current jobs combined. Night shift meant she could work while Claire slept, reducing daycare costs. Benefits after 90 days meant health insurance for both of them. The position was available immediately, which meant she could start earning money before the electricity got shut off. Luna had clicked the link and filled out the application before she could talk herself out of it. She'd used her current legal name, Luna Rhodes, her mother's maiden name that she'd legally adopted after Claire's birth. She'd left the MBA off her resume entirely, listing only her basic undergraduate degree. She'd emphasized her reliability and attention to detail rather than her strategic thinking skills. 3 days later, she'd received a call for an interview. 5 days after that, she'd been offered the position. 1 week later, Luna had put on a blue custodial uniform with Vanguard Industries embroidered on the pocket and walked through the doors of the building where her daughter's father worked. The irony had been so bitter, Luna could taste it. Luna's first night at Vanguard Industries had been surreal. The building looked different after business hours, quieter, emptier, stripped of the daytime energy that made it feel important. The overhead lights were dimmed to conserve energy. The bustling lobby became an echoing space where Luna's footsteps sounded too loud against polished floors. Her supervisor, Thomas, was a 50-something man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. He'd shown Luna the supply closets, explained the cleaning protocols, and handed her a detailed schedule of which floors needed attention on which nights. "Executives are on the 20th floor, Thomas had said, consulting his clipboard. "You'll handle that area on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. They're particular about their offices, so pay attention to details. Don't move papers on desks. Don't touch anything that looks important. And if you see something that concerns you, like a document left open on a desk, report it to me." "Security issue." Luna nodded, her throat tight. "The executive floor, where Logan worked. You okay?" Thomas had asked, noticing her expression. "I know the night shift isn't glamorous, but the pay is steady and the work isn't too demanding once you learn the routine." "I'm fine," Luna had managed. "Just tired. My daughter didn't sleep well last night." It hadn't been a lie. Claire rarely slept through the night, which meant Luna rarely did either. Adding a night shift job to her already exhausted state felt impossible. But Luna had survived impossible things before. She'd survive this too. That first Thursday night, Luna had pushed her cleaning cart onto the 20th floor at 11 p.m. The executive wing was silent, the offices dark except for emergency lighting. Nameplates marked each door: Jennifer Walsh, CFO, Robert Davidson, VP of Operations, Gerald Hastings, CEO, and there, 3 doors from the end, Logan Price, VP of Strategic Development. Luna had stood outside that door for a full minute before she could force herself to swipe her access card and enter. The office was spacious, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city, a mahogany desk that probably cost more than Luna's monthly rent, leather chairs, built-in bookshelves lined with business publications and hardcovers. It smelled like him. 6 years later, and Luna still recognized the scent of Logan's cologne mixed with something else that was just him. The recognition had hit her like a physical blow, making her grip the handle of her cleaning cart to steady herself. This was Logan's space. These were his things. That jacket hanging on the back of his chair was something he wore during the day. That coffee mug on his desk with the Vanguard Industries logo was something he drank from. Those framed photos on his shelves showed him at various corporate events, shaking hands with important people, accepting awards, standing beside Gerald Hastings with the confident smile of someone who belonged. Luna had cleaned that office with shaking hands, fighting back tears the entire time. She'd emptied his trash can, filled with drafts of memos and protein bar wrappers. She'd dusted his shelves, careful around the photos and awards. She'd vacuumed his carpet, noting the small stain near the window where he'd apparently spilled something. Every surface she touched felt like touching Logan himself. Every object she moved felt like an invasion of privacy and a twisted form of intimacy. This was his professional life, and Luna was moving through it as the most dismissed person in the building. The person who scrubbed toilets and emptied trash, whose presence was so beneath notice that she might as well not exist. The ultimate irony wasn't lost on her. Luna had once hoped to work at Vanguard Industries as a business professional, contributing ideas and strategies. Now she was here, scrubbing floors. She'd once walked into this building on Logan's arm, wearing a silver dress and naive hope. Now she wore a janitor's uniform and entered through the service entrance. But she needed the job. Claire needed health insurance and regular meals and a stable home. Luna's pride didn't pay bills. Her resentment didn't keep the electricity on. So she swallowed both and did the work. The fear of being recognized had consumed Luna during those first few weeks. Every time she passed someone in the hallway, every time an executive stayed late and was still in their office when Luna came to clean, she braced herself for the moment when someone would look at her closely and remember the young woman in the silver dress from 6 years ago. It never happened. Nobody looked at her closely enough to recognize anything. The executives who worked late would glance up from their computers, offer a distracted thanks, or excuse me as Luna worked around them, then immediately return to their screens. She was part of the furniture, a function that kept the building running but didn't require acknowledgement as a person. The administrative assistants were slightly better. Some learned Luna's name and asked polite questions about her day. But even they saw the uniform before they saw Luna. They saw cleaning lady as a role rather than a person with a history and complexity. Luna understood why. The woman who'd attended the gala 6 years ago and the woman who now cleaned that same building existed in completely different universes. One wore designer clothing borrowed from friends and talked about business strategy. The other wore a shapeless blue uniform and pushed a cart full of cleaning supplies. One walked with confidence born from education and opportunity. The other moved with the careful dismissal of someone who couldn't afford to attract the wrong kind of attention. They were the same person, but nobody who saw the janitor could conceive of her ever having been anything else. That's how class worked, how being overlooked worked. People saw what they expected to see, and they expected cleaning staff to have always been cleaning staff. Even Logan, on the rare occasions when their paths crossed, didn't recognize her. The first time Luna had seen him in person after starting the job, her heart had nearly stopped. She'd been refilling paper towels in the 20th floor bathroom when she'd heard voices in the hallway. Logan's voice, specifically, discussing quarterly projections with someone. Luna had frozen, her hands full of paper towel rolls, trying to decide if she should hide in a stall Or just pray he walked past without noticing her? He'd walked past. He and Gerald Hastings had been deep in conversation about market expansion, strategies, and Logan's eyes had slid right over Luna without pausing. No recognition, no hesitation. Just the same polite, distant glance anyone might give the cleaning staff before returning to their important discussion. Luna had stood in that bathroom for 5 minutes after they'd left, struggling to breathe normally. The relief that Logan hadn't recognized her warred with the hurt that he'd looked at her and seen nothing. No flicker of memory, no pause of curiosity, nothing. She was dismissed. Truly, completely dismissed. Over time, Luna had learned to use that dismissal as a shield. If nobody recognized her, nobody could ask uncomfortable questions. If nobody saw her as a person with a past, nobody would wonder why Luna Rhodes bore such a strong resemblance to Luna Thorne. The uniform had become armor. The anonymity had become protection. But it still hurts. Every single time Logan walked past her without seeing her, it hurt. Thursday nights became Luna's routine for the executive floor, which meant every Thursday she spent 45 minutes in Logan Price's office. She learned his habits through the remnants of his workday. He drank coffee black, 3 cups minimum based on the rings on his desk. He ate lunch at his desk more often than not, takeout containers in the trash, sometimes barely touched. He worked late frequently, documents dated same day piled on his desk, suggesting he'd been reviewing them until shortly before Luna arrived. He was organized but not obsessive about it. Papers were stacked neatly but not filed away immediately. Books were aligned on shelves but not alphabetized. There was a personal quality to the space that suggested Logan actually used it as more than just a desk to work at. A framed photo of what looked like a family cabin, a coffee mug from a charity run, a small plant that someone watered regularly. Luna learned to clean his office quickly and efficiently, touching as little as possible while still doing thorough work. She tried not to look at the papers on his desk, tried not to read the sticky notes. With his handwriting, tried not to inhale his scent that lingered in the space. But it was impossible not to absorb details. Impossible not to construct a mental image of Logan's life from these small pieces of evidence. He was working on a major project involving sustainable building practices. Memos and reports referenced environmental impact studies and green construction materials. He'd received an award for mentoring junior staff. The plaque was new on his shelf, dated just 2 months prior. He had a dentist appointment scheduled. The reminder card was stuck to his computer monitor. These were the mundane details of Logan's life, and Luna had access to all of them while Logan had no idea she existed. Sometimes Logan worked so late that he was still in his office when Luna arrived. Those nights were the hardest. Luna would knock softly, and Logan would look up from his computer with exhausted eyes and wave her in. "Sorry, just give me 5 minutes to finish this email," he'd say, already turning back to his screen. Luna would clean around him as quietly as possible, hyper-aware of every sound she made. Logan never tried to make conversation. Why would he? She was the cleaning lady. Their worlds didn't intersect in any meaningful way, but Luna could hear fragments of his phone calls, could overhear conversations. When colleagues stopped by his office before Luna left, she learned that Logan was respected but somewhat isolated. People admired his work ethic but seemed uncertain how to connect with him personally. He was described as brilliant but distant, fair but hard to read, professional to a fault. The warm, open man Luna had fallen in love with 6 years ago seemed to have disappeared. In his place was someone guarded, someone who kept people at arm's length, someone who seemed married to his work in a way that left no room for personal connections. Luna wondered what had changed him. Had she been wrong about who he was from the start? Or had something happened to make him close himself off? 4 months into working at Vanguard Industries, Luna had been cleaning the break room. On the executive floor when 2 administrative assistants had come in for coffee. They'd barely glanced at Luna, just 2 women continuing a conversation. They'd started elsewhere, treating Luna's presence as irrelevant. "Did you hear Rebecca Sullivan is getting married?" one had said, pouring coffee into an expensive-looking travel mug. Finally, her engagement to Logan Price falling apart really did a number on her confidence. Luna's hands had stilled on the counter she'd been wiping down. That was, what, 5 years ago? The other assistant had replied, I heard Gerald Hastings tried to arrange the whole thing, wanted Logan to marry into the Sullivan family for business connections. But Logan called it off before they even set a wedding date. Really? I heard Rebecca broke it off because Logan was too emotionally unavailable. No, definitely Logan. My friend works in HR and saw the paperwork when Logan changed his emergency contact back to his mother. Rebecca was furious. She told everyone Logan had commitment issues and couldn't handle a real relationship. They'd left the break room still gossiping, never noticing that Luna had stopped cleaning entirely. Logan hadn't married his mysterious fiancée. The engagement that had been used to reject Luna's desperate letter had dissolved. Within a year of Luna's letter being returned, Logan Price had been single again. The information had hit Luna like a truck. All these years, she'd assumed Logan had gotten married, started a family, built a life with someone from his own world. The rejection had seemed final, permanent, part of a clear trajectory away from Luna and towards someone more suitable. But Logan hadn't married Rebecca Sullivan. He hadn't married anyone. Luna had gone home that night and spent hours lying awake, trying to process what this meant. Had the engagement been real when Luna's letter was returned? Or had Gerald Hastings lied in that typed note, using a fabricated engagement to scare Luna away? If the engagement was real, why had it fallen apart so quickly? Over the following months, Luna had pieced together more of Logan's personal history through overheard conversations and office gossip. The failed engagement with Rebecca had apparently been a turning point. After the breakup, Logan had thrown himself into work with single-minded intensity. He'd climbed from junior VP to full VP in record time. He'd led successful projects that expanded Vanguard's market share. He'd become Gerald Hastings' clear favorite and presumed successor. But he'd also become isolated. According to office gossip, Logan didn't date. He didn't socialize outside of professional obligations. He attended required corporate events but left early. He was respected, admired even, but nobody seemed to actually know him. The staff speculated endlessly. Some thought Logan was nursing a broken heart. Others believed he was simply more interested in business than relationships. A few suggested he was waiting for the right person and hadn't found them yet. Nobody knew for sure because Logan didn't share personal information. Luna had listened to these theories while emptying trash cans and restocking supplies, forming her own understanding. Logan had closed himself off. Something had happened to make the warm, open man she'd known retreat behind walls of professionalism and emotional distance. She'd wondered, sometimes, if she'd played a role in that transformation. Had their night together meant something to him too? Had her sudden disappearance from his life affected him the way his disappearance had devastated her? But then Luna would remember the returned letter, the threat of harassment charges, the way Logan looked through her without recognition every time they crossed paths. Whatever Logan might have felt 6 years ago, it clearly hadn't been strong, enough to make him fight for her or search for answers when she vanished. By Luna's 3rd year at Vanguard Industries, Logan Price had become something of a legend within the company. At 32 years old, he was the youngest person to ever hold the title of VP of Strategic Development. He'd spearheaded initiatives that had increased company revenue by 30% over 3 years. He'd negotiated partnerships with major environmental organizations that had transformed Vanguard's public image from a traditional corporation into an industry leader in sustainable business practices. Gerald Hastings talked about Logan like a proud father discussing a successful son. Logan represents everything Vanguard Industries should be, he'd said at a company-wide meeting Luna had overheard while cleaning nearby conference rooms. Brilliant, strategic, committed to both profitability and responsibility. He's proof that doing good and doing well aren't mutually exclusive. The junior staff idolized Logan. He was known for being fair in his evaluations, generous with credit when projects succeeded, and protective of his team when things went wrong. He'd fought for raises and promotions for people who deserved them. He'd challenged upper management when policies seemed to prioritize short-term profits over employee welfare or environmental impact. But he was also distant in ways that made genuine connection impossible. Logan didn't attend happy hours or team bonding events unless they were mandatory. He didn't make small talk in elevators or share personal stories during meetings. He was professional, cordial, and utterly closed off. Luna had watched this version of Logan from the margins, trying to reconcile him with the man she'd known for one night 6 years ago. That Logan had talked openly about his fears and dreams. He'd laughed easily. He'd touched Luna with tenderness and looked at her with warmth that felt genuine. This Logan seemed like a completely different person, or perhaps like someone who decided emotional connection was too dangerous, too complicated, too risky. Luna understood that impulse. She'd built walls of her own. She'd learned to function while keeping people at arm's length because letting anyone close meant risking the kind of pain that Logan had inflicted on her. Maybe Logan had learned the same lesson from a different experience. Or maybe Luna had never really known him at all. Maybe the warmth and openness had been an act, a temporary performance for someone he'd never planned to see again. Either way, the Logan Price who worked at Vanguard Industries was unreachable. He existed in a different stratosphere from Luna Rhodes, the night shift cleaning lady. They shared physical space but inhabited completely different realities. There were nights when Luna finished cleaning Logan's office but couldn't bring herself to leave immediately. Usually this happened when she was particularly exhausted, when the weight of single parenthood and financial stress and 3 years of being dismissed pressed down too heavily. On those nights, Luna would stand at Logan's floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city spread below. The view was spectacular from the 20th floor, downtown lights creating constellations on the ground, highways threading through buildings like rivers of red and white, the whole metropolitan area pulsing with life and possibility. Luna would stand there with her hands pressed against the cool glass, allowing herself to indulge in fantasies she normally kept locked away. What if she told Logan about Claire? What if she walked up to him in the hallway, pulled off the cloak of dismissal her uniform provided, and said, "Look at me, really look. Remember me. You have a daughter." In these fantasies, Logan's face would transform with recognition. He'd be shocked, then overwhelmed with emotion. He'd apologize for the misunderstanding, explain that he'd never received her letter, never known she'd tried to contact him. He'd want to meet Claire immediately. He'd be grateful Luna had told him, ready to step up and be the father their daughter deserved. The fantasy always ended the same way: Logan, Luna, and Claire becoming some version of a family. Not the traditional kind necessarily, but something functional and healing. Claire getting to know her father, Luna getting closure on the questions that had haunted her for 6 years, Logan getting a chance to be part of his daughter's life. But then Luna would shake herself out of these daydreams, remembering reality. The returned letter, the threat of harassment charges, the way Logan looked through her like she didn't exist. The 3 years she'd spent cleaning his office while he remained completely oblivious to her identity. If Logan had wanted to find her after their night together, he could have. He had resources Luna couldn't fathom. He could have hired investigators, searched records, and made genuine effort. He hadn't. That spoke volumes about how much she'd actually meant to him. And even if Luna did tell him now, even if she stripped away the anonymity and revealed herself, what would that accomplish? Logan would probably think she was trying to extort money. He'd question paternity. He'd involve lawyers. He'd turn what Luna had protected for 5 years into something ugly and complicated. Claire didn't deserve that. She deserved better than a father who had to be forced to acknowledge her existence. Luna had made a promise to herself during those late-night moments in Logan's office. She would not humiliate herself by begging for his attention. She would not give him the power to reject her, and more importantly, reject Claire a second time. Logan had made his choice 6 years ago when he'd returned her letter unopened. He'd made it again every time he'd walked past her without recognition. He'd made it by building a life that had no room for Luna or the possibility of what they'd created together. Fine. Luna didn't need him to validate her or their daughter. She'd built a life without Logan's acknowledgement. She'd raised Claire to be smart and kind and confident. She'd survived 3 years of working in the shadow of the man who'd destroyed her, and she'd come out stronger for it. More than survived, Luna had been planning. Every night she cleaned Logan's office, she'd been gathering information. Every overheard conversation had taught her something about how Vanguard Industries operated, where its weaknesses were, what opportunities existed in the market they weren't exploiting. Luna had taken that information and used it to build green solutions. Her little company wasn't competing directly with Vanguard yet, but it was growing. The contract she'd secured last month was just the beginning. Luna had bigger plans, and those plans had been shaped by 3 years of dismissed observation. She was going to succeed on her own terms. She was going to show everyone who'd overlooked her exactly what the cleaning lady was capable of. And she was going to do it without Logan Price's help or approval. That was Luna's form of revenge. Not dramatic or loud, but methodical and effective. She would rise while remaining dismissed by the people who thought they were above her. Then, when she'd built something undeniable, she would reveal herself, not to beg, not to ask for anything, simply to show them what they'd missed. Logan Price would eventually learn that the night shift cleaning lady had been the woman from his past, the mother of his child, and a business owner who'd used everything she'd learned in his building to create her own success. He would have to reconcile the fact that he'd looked through her for 3 years while she'd been studying him, learning from him, preparing to compete with him. The humiliation would be his, not hers. That thought kept Luna going through the hardest nights, when she was exhausted from working and parenting, when Claire asked questions about her father that Luna struggled to answer, when the bills piled up faster than the paychecks, when she cleaned Logan's office and fought back tears. She was building toward something. Every indignity she endured was temporary. Every moment of being dismissed was strategic. Luna Rhodes had learned to survive in the shadow of the man who'd destroyed her. But she wouldn't stay in that shadow forever. Soon, very soon, she would step into the light on her own terms. And when she did, Logan Price would finally see her, really see her. And by then, it would be too late for him to claim any credit for the woman she'd become or the life she'd built. That victory would belong entirely to Luna. If you're feeling Luna's pain right now, drop a comment and let me know. Have you ever had to work in silence around someone who broke your heart? Have you ever had to swallow your pride just to survive? These moments shape us in ways that people who haven't lived through them can't fully understand. If this story is hitting home, make sure you're subscribed to Mr. Steele Rich Stories for more narratives that explore the complicated reality of human relationships and resilience. Luna's transformation from dismissed cleaning lady to business owner hadn't happened overnight. It had been built in stolen moments. 15 minutes during Claire's afternoon naps, an hour after her daughter fell asleep at night. 30-minute lunch breaks at Vanguard Industries where Luna ate quickly and then pulled out her laptop in the break room. Every spare moment became currency Luna invested in building something that belonged entirely to her, while other night shift workers scrolled through social media or watched videos. On their phones during breaks, Luna researched sustainable business practices. While Claire colored at the kitchen table, Luna drafted business plans on second-hand notebooks. While the rest of the world slept, Luna sat at her tiny kitchen table with her laptop glowing in the darkness, teaching. Her self-skills her MBA program hadn't covered: web design, digital marketing, environmental certification processes. It had started as therapy more than anything else, working at Vanguard Industries, cleaning Logan's office and moving through corridors where she'd once hoped to work as a professional, had required Luna to find some way to reclaim her sense of purpose. The cleaning job paid bills, but it was slowly eroding her sense of self. She needed something that reminded her she was more than the uniform she wore. So Luna had started taking notes. Not about Logan specifically, though she couldn't help absorbing details about his work, but about Vanguard Industries as a whole. The company's weaknesses, the complaints she overheard from employees about outdated systems and inefficient processes, the environmental concerns that executives discussed in meetings Luna cleaned, around, worries about regulatory changes, pressure from investors. To demonstrate sustainability commitments, the challenge of updating old infrastructure to meet modern green building standards. Luna had worked in this building long enough to understand how corporations thought. They wanted to appear environmentally conscious without spending too much money or disrupting established workflows. They wanted certifications they could advertise to shareholders and clients. They wanted solutions that looked impressive in press releases but didn't require fundamental operational changes. There was opportunity in that gap between what companies claimed to value and what they actually implemented. Luna had seen it clearly from her position at the margins. She'd watched Vanguard Industries hire expensive consultants who recommended elaborate changes the company never fully adopted. She'd seen green initiatives launched with great fanfare and then quietly abandoned when they proved inconvenient. Luna began to see a path forward. If she could offer companies practical, cost-effective sustainability solutions, not idealistic transformations but achievable improvements, there might be a market for her services. Especially if she approached it from a ground-level perspective, understanding what actually worked in real operational environments rather than what looked good in presentations. The idea had started to take shape. But ideas alone didn't pay bills. Luna needed to build something tangible, something that could generate income and eventually replace her cleaning job. She needed to start small and grow strategically, so she devoted every spare moment to making it happen. Claire's bedtime became Luna's work time. Weekends, when Claire was with Luna's mother, became business development time. Every holiday, every day off, every possible hour got funneled into building what would eventually become Green Solutions. It was exhausting. There were nights when Luna fell asleep at her laptop, waking up hours later with keyboard imprints on her face and Claire calling for her from the next room. There were weeks when Luna survived on 4 hours of sleep, fueled by cheap coffee and stubborn determination. There were moments when the whole thing felt impossible, when Luna questioned whether she was wasting time and energy on a fantasy that would never materialize. But she kept going, because the alternative was remaining dismissed forever. Because Claire deserved to see her mother as someone who built things, rather than someone who only cleaned up after other people's success. Because Luna needed to prove to herself that the woman in the silver dress 6 years ago hadn't been a fluke, that she actually possessed the intelligence and capability she'd once believed in. The blog had been Luna's starting point, chosen because it required minimal investment. She'd created a free website using a basic template and started writing articles during Claire's nap times. The content drew from Luna's unique position. She was both an MBA graduate who understood business, strategy, and a working cleaner who knew which products and methods actually worked in practice. Her first posts had been simple guides. 5 eco-friendly cleaning products that actually work in commercial settings. How to reduce chemical exposure in office buildings without sacrificing cleanliness. The real cost of traditional cleaning supplies, environmental and health impact analysis. Luna had written in clear, accessible language, avoiding both corporate jargon and academic pretension. She'd included practical advice, cost comparisons and honest assessments of what worked versus what was marketed effectively but performed poorly. She'd photographed products from her own cleaning cart, adding authenticity that professionally produced content lacked. For the first 3 months, the blog had maybe 20 regular readers mostly, other cleaning professionals Luna had connected with through online forums. She'd posted consistently anyway, treating it like homework, building a body of content, even though nobody seemed to be paying attention. Then one of her articles, Why Your Office Building's Green Cleaning Service Probably Isn't What Facilities Managers Need to Know, had been shared in a facilities management discussion group. Then shared again and again. Within a week, the article had been viewed 15,000 times. Comments started pouring in from facilities managers, building owners, and environmental health, and safety officers who'd been frustrated by the same greenwashing Luna had documented. Suddenly, Luna's blog had an audience. People subscribed to her email list. They asked questions in the comments. They requested more content on specific topics. Luna had found her niche. She was bridging the gap between environmental ideals and operational reality, speaking to professionals who wanted to do better but needed practical guidance rather than judgment. She'd expanded the blog to include case studies, interviews with other cleaning professionals, implementing sustainable practices, and detailed analyses of different certification programs. She'd created downloadable resources, checklists for transitioning to eco-friendly products, comparison charts for different cleaning systems, budget templates for calculating cost differences between traditional and sustainable approaches. The blog grew steadily. Within 6 months, Luna had 10,000 regular readers. Within a year, she was receiving requests from product manufacturers asking her to review their items. She'd maintained strict integrity, refusing to promote anything she hadn't personally tested clearly, marking any compensated partnerships, prioritizing her readers' trust over quick monetization. The viral growth had been intoxicating. For years, Luna had been dismissed at Vanguard Industries, her insights and intelligence ignored. Now, strangers across the country were reading her words, implementing her recommendations, and thanking her for practical solutions to problems they'd been struggling with. Luna had built something valuable from nothing but her knowledge and effort, but she'd also been strategic about it. The blog wasn't just ego gratification, it was building her credibility as an expert. Every article she published, every positive comment she received, every subscriber she gained, it all added up to something she could leverage. Luna was creating proof that she knew what she was talking about, establishing herself as an authority in a niche field. She'd been planning for the next step before she even knew exactly what that step would be. 18 months into running the blog, Luna had received an email that changed everything. A small property management company in the suburbs had found her website and wanted advice. They managed 3 office buildings and were under pressure from their largest tenant, a tech startup with strong environmental values, to implement more sustainable cleaning practices. Could Luna help them develop a plan? Luna had stared at that email for 10 full minutes, her pulse racing. This was a consulting inquiry, an actual business opportunity, someone willing to pay her for expertise, rather than just reading her free content. She'd responded carefully, professional, but not desperate. Yes, she could help. She'd need to conduct a site assessment, review their current cleaning protocols and product inventory, interview their cleaning staff and analyze their budget constraints. Then she'd develop a customized transition plan with realistic timelines and cost projections. Her fee would be $1,500. Luna had pulled that number from thin air, trying to balance charging enough to be taken seriously without pricing herself out of consideration. She'd held her breath and hit send, already second-guessing the decision. They'd accepted within 24 hours. Luna had conducted her first professional consulting project while working around her night shift schedule at Vanguard Industries. She'd visited the properties during Claire's preschool hours, interviewed staff during her lunch breaks, and compiled her report during late-night sessions at her kitchen table. The work had been exhausting but exhilarating. She was using her education again, applying strategic thinking to real business problems, being compensated for her intelligence rather than her ability to push a mop. The property management company had implemented most of her recommendations. 3 months later, they'd referred her to another client, then another. Luna's consulting practice grew organically through word-of-mouth referrals, each successful project leading to more opportunities. She'd dusted off her rusty MBA skills, financial analysis, strategic planning, change management, and applied them to this niche focus. Luna had created standardized assessment tools, developed proprietary evaluation metrics, and built a systematic approach to helping organizations transition to sustainable cleaning practices. She'd learned to translate her ground-level knowledge into boardroom language, presenting to facilities, managers and executives with the same confidence she'd once hoped to bring to Vanguard Industries. After 6 months of consulting projects, Luna had formalized the business. She'd registered Green Solutions LLC, opened a business bank account, and hired an accountant to handle the tax implications. She'd invested in a professional website, created marketing materials, and established processes that would allow the business to scale beyond just her personal time and effort. The business wasn't huge, but it was hers. Luna Rhodes, night shift cleaning lady, single mother, woman who'd spent years being dismissed, was now Luna Rhodes, CEO of Green Solutions. She had business cards. She had clients who valued her expertise. She had income streams that didn't require her to scrub other people's toilets. It felt like reclaiming a piece of herself she'd thought was lost forever. Green Solutions' first official contracts had been modest. A small medical office wanted help transitioning to non-toxic cleaning products for patient safety. A private school needed guidance on environmentally friendly maintenance practices for their new certified building. A boutique hotel chain was looking for sustainable housekeeping protocols that would appeal to eco-conscious travelers. Luna had approached each project with meticulous attention to detail. She'd over-delivered on every contract, providing more guidance than required, following up after implementation to ensure success, and maintaining relationships with clients long after the initial projects concluded. She'd understood that her reputation was everything. Each satisfied client became a reference, a testimonial, a stepping stone toward bigger opportunities. The contracts had been small, but they'd been steady. Luna had started earning an additional $1,000 a month, then $2,000, then $3,000. It wasn't enough to quit Vanguard Industries yet, not with Claire's expenses and the constant financial uncertainty of single parenthood. But it was proof of concept, evidence that Green Solutions could actually work as a business rather than just a side hustle. Luna had continued working both jobs, running on caffeine and determination. She'd cleaned offices at night and consulted with clients during the day. She'd answered emails during her breaks at Vanguard and drafted proposals after Claire went to sleep. It had been brutal, unsustainable, the kind of schedule that guaranteed eventual burnout. But Luna had kept pushing because she could see the finish line. Each contract brought her closer to financial independence. Each successful project made the next opportunity more likely. She'd been building momentum, even when the building felt impossibly slow. Then, last month, everything had accelerated. Riverside Development Corporation had found Luna through a referral from one of her previous clients. They were one of the largest commercial property developers in the region, managing office, buildings, retail spaces, and mixed-use developments throughout the metropolitan area. They'd recently committed to achieving carbon neutrality across their entire portfolio within 10 years, an ambitious goal that required comprehensive changes to how their properties operated. Building maintenance and cleaning represented a significant portion of their environmental footprint. Riverside's current approach was fractured. Different properties used different vendors with varying standards. They wanted to consolidate and standardize their cleaning operations while dramatically improving environmental performance. They were looking for someone who could help them develop a comprehensive strategy and potentially implement it across their portfolio. The opportunity had been enormous. Luna had known immediately that this was different from her previous projects. Bigger scope, bigger budget, bigger potential impact on her business. She'd prepared for the pitch meeting like her life depended on it, which in many ways it did. Luna had spent 2 weeks researching Riverside Development Corporation, analyzing their public sustainability commitments, identifying gaps between their stated goals and current practices. She'd created a detailed presentation showing exactly how Green Solutions could help them achieve their targets while reducing costs through operational efficiency. The pitch meeting had been scheduled for a Tuesday morning, which meant Luna had to request time off from Vanguard Industries, the first time she'd ever done so for anything other than Claire's needs. She'd felt guilty lying to Thomas about a doctor's appointment, but the alternative was explaining that she was running a competing business on the side. Luna had walked into Riverside's conference room wearing her only professional suit, slightly outdated but still presentable, carrying her presentation materials and trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. 3 executives had been waiting: the VP of Operations, the Director of Facilities Management, and the Sustainability Officer. For 90 minutes, Luna had presented. She'd shown them cost analyses demonstrating how sustainable practices could reduce expenses through lower product costs, improved employee health, and reduced environmental compliance risks. She'd outlined a phased implementation plan that would allow them to pilot changes in select properties before rolling out portfolio-wide. She'd addressed concerns about service quality, staff training, and tenant satisfaction. She'd spoken their language: ROI, efficiency metrics, risk mitigation, while also appealing to their stated environmental values. Most importantly, Luna had differentiated herself from larger consulting firms. She wasn't offering generic advice copied from templates. She was offering ground-level expertise from someone who'd actually done the work, who understood operational realities, who could bridge the gap between executive strategy and frontline implementation. The executives had asked tough questions. Luna had answered confidently, drawing on her 3 years of hands-on experience at Vanguard Industries, without mentioning that experience specifically. She'd shared case studies from her previous clients, provided references, and offered to conduct a free pilot assessment of one riverside property to demonstrate her approach. At the end of the meeting, the VP of Operations had looked at his colleagues, then back at Luna. "This is the most practical sustainability presentation I've seen in 5 years of searching for solutions. You actually understand how buildings work, not just how they should work theoretically." 2 weeks after the pitch meeting, Luna had received a contract offer. Riverside Development Corporation wanted to hire Green Solutions for a comprehensive 12-month engagement. Luna would conduct assessments of all 15 properties in their portfolio, develop customized transition plans for each building, oversee implementation, train facility staff, and provide ongoing support. The compensation had made Luna's hands shake when she'd read it. $75,000 for the year, paid in monthly installments. Additional performance bonuses if they achieved specific environmental targets. And, most incredibly, potential for contract renewal and expansion if the first year went well. $75,000. Luna had earned $28,000 last year working full-time nights at Vanguard Industries. This single contract would nearly triple her income. It would mean health insurance she could afford. It would mean Claire could do activities like dance classes or summer camp instead of spending all day at the cheapest childcare Luna could find. It would mean Luna could quit the cleaning job that had been slowly destroying her spirit. She'd signed the contract the same day, her signature slightly shaky from the adrenaline and disbelief flooding her system. The following Monday, Luna had submitted her 2-week notice to Vanguard Industries. Thomas had been surprised but supportive. "You've been a good worker," he'd said. "Reliable, thorough. I hope whatever you're moving on to works out well for you." Luna had almost told him the truth, that she was leaving to run her own successful consulting business, that the dismissed cleaning lady had built something significant while scrubbing his floors. But she'd held back. Let them continue not seeing her. Let them assume she'd found another cleaning job, or maybe given up working entirely. Their assumptions didn't define her anymore. She'd worked her final 2 weeks at Vanguard Industries with a lightness she hadn't felt in 3 years. Every Thursday when she cleaned Logan's office for the last time, Luna had felt a savage satisfaction. He still didn't recognize her. He still had no idea that the woman emptying his trash was about to become his competitor. He still walked past her without seeing her. But soon, very soon, he would have to see her. Because Luna's success was about to intersect with Logan's professional world in ways he couldn't ignore. During Luna's final week at Vanguard Industries, she'd overheard a conversation that had felt like fate delivering a gift wrapped in irony. Gerald Hastings and Logan had been discussing Vanguard's upcoming contract negotiations. The company's current building management contract was expiring in 6 months. They were dissatisfied with their current vendor. Service quality had declined while costs had increased. They wanted to explore alternatives. "We need someone who can deliver both cost efficiency and credibility on environmental standards," Gerald had said. "The board is pushing for more aggressive sustainability reporting, and our current setup makes us look mediocre at best. What about going with one of the big national firms?" Logan had suggested. "They'd have the capacity to handle all our properties. Too expensive and too cookie-cutter. I want someone hungry enough to give us personal attention and innovative enough to actually improve our performance. Let's cast a wider net in the RFP process. Maybe we'll find a gem." Luna had been cleaning the conference room outside Gerald's office, hidden behind a partial wall, absorbing every word. Vanguard Industries was about to issue a request for proposal for building management services. They wanted sustainability credentials, cost efficiency, and personalized service. Green Solutions could offer exactly that. The irony was so perfect, Luna had almost laughed out loud. She'd spent 3 years cleaning Vanguard's buildings as a dismissed employee. Now she might compete to manage those same buildings as a business owner. Luna Rhodes, who'd been turned away by Vanguard security 6 years ago, might soon negotiate contracts with Vanguard's executives as an equal. After finishing her last shift at Vanguard, Luna had gone home and immediately researched the RFP process. She'd contacted her client at Riverside Development. They'd agreed to serve as a reference and even offered to co-present if it would strengthen her proposal. She'd started drafting a response to the RFP before it was even officially released, preparing to position Green Solutions as the ideal vendor for Vanguard Industries' needs. Luna understood Vanguard's buildings better than any outside consultant possibly could. She knew which floors got the most foot traffic, which areas had ongoing maintenance issues, which departments complained most about cleaning services. She'd absorbed 3 years of operational knowledge, while everyone assumed she wasn't paying attention. Now she would use that knowledge to compete for a contract worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. If Green Solutions won the Vanguard account, Luna would go from earning $15 an hour, cleaning their offices, to earning 6 figures annually managing their facility services. The transformation would be complete. The dismissed cleaning lady would become the business owner Vanguard's executives had to respect and negotiate with as a peer. Luna had been sitting at her kitchen table the night after submitting her resignation from Vanguard, laptop open, to the draft RFP response she was preparing, when the full reality of what she'd accomplished finally hit her. 3 years ago, she'd been desperate enough to take a job cleaning the offices of the man who'd rejected her and the company that had treated her like she didn't exist. She'd put on that blue uniform every night and move through those corridors like a ghost, watching people live lives she'd once hoped to have, building success she'd once believed she could achieve. They'd never seen her. Not really. They'd looked through her, around her, past her. She'd been furniture, background, necessary but unimportant. Except Luna had been paying attention the entire time. She'd been learning, observing, collecting information and insights they had never imagined the cleaning lady would understand or care about. She'd been taking notes on their blind spots, their inefficiencies, their missed opportunities. She'd been building expertise from the ground up, literally from the floors she'd scrubbed. And now she was rising. Green Solutions was real, legitimate, successful. Luna had clients who valued her expertise, a contract that would change her and Claire's life, and the knowledge that she'd built it all without anyone's help or approval. She hadn't needed Logan's acknowledgement or Vanguard's recognition. She'd done it on her own terms, in her own time, with her own effort. The savage satisfaction Luna felt wasn't about revenge exactly. It was about vindication, proof that being overlooked didn't mean being worthless, evidence that dismissed people still had power, intelligence, value. They were just operating beneath the sightline of people too self-absorbed to look down. Let them see what the dismissed cleaning lady can do, Luna had whispered to herself that night, a fierce smile crossing her face. Soon, Logan Price would learn that the woman he'd walked past without recognition for 3 years was the same woman who'd carried his child, built a successful business, and was now competing to manage his company's facilities. He would have to reconcile the fact that he'd been blind to someone operating right under his nose, building power from the margins, while he'd been too focused on his own world to notice. Gerald Hastings would discover that the janitor his company had employed at minimum wage was actually an MBA graduate and business owner sophisticated enough to compete for major corporate contracts. He would have to confront the reality that his assumptions about who mattered, and who didn't, had caused him to completely misjudge someone's capabilities. The executives who'd held meetings while Luna emptied trash 6 feet away, discussing strategy as if she were a lamp, would realize she'd been absorbing everything they said. The knowledge they'd treated as privileged information had educated their competition. Luna wasn't dismissed anymore. She'd stepped out of the shadows on her own terms, carrying credentials she'd earned and success she'd built. And the best part, the truly satisfying part, was that she'd done it while they were still looking through her, still assuming she didn't matter. By the time they finally saw Luna Rhodes clearly, she would already be their equal. Or, better yet, she would be in a position to make decisions about contracts and partnerships that affected them. The power dynamic had shifted. They just didn't know it yet. 2 weeks before the Vanguard Industries annual charity gala, Luna had been working her usual Thursday night shift on the executive floor. It was late, almost midnight, and most of the executives had left hours ago. The 20th floor was quiet, except for the hum of the ventilation system and the occasional distant sound of elevator doors opening on lower levels where the late shift security guards made their rounds. Luna had always preferred these quiet hours. During the day, the executive wing buzzed with activity, assistants rushing between offices, executives taking calls with doors open, meetings spilling into hallways. At night, the space belonged to Luna and the other cleaning staff. They could work without navigating around important people, without being made to feel like obstacles in someone else's day. This particular Thursday, Luna had been assigned to the executive wing solo. 2 other cleaners had called in sick, and Thomas had redistributed the workload. Luna didn't mind. The extra hours meant extra pay, and she'd become efficient. Enough at the job that working alone didn't significantly slow her down. She'd already finished the conference rooms and common areas. Now, she was making her way down the executive corridor, checking which offices still needed attention. The hallway was dimly lit after hours, with only every third overhead light remaining on to conserve energy. Luna pushed her cleaning cart quietly, the wheels making soft sounds against the carpet. She'd learned to move silently through these spaces, partly out of professional courtesy, partly out of habit. Dismissed people moved quietly. She'd been approaching Gerald Hastings' office when she'd noticed his door was slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the darkened hallway. Luna had paused, surprised. Gerald almost never worked this late. He was usually gone by 6, off to charity dinners or golf club events, or whatever activities occupied wealthy executives after business hours. Luna had hesitated, uncertain whether to knock or come back later. Before she could decide, she'd heard Gerald's voice from inside the office. He was on a phone call, his tone clipped with frustration. Professional protocol suggested Luna should move on and return later, but something in Gerald's tone had made her pause. She'd recognized that particular quality of voice, the kind someone used when they were alone and didn't bother moderating their words for an audience. Luna had pretended to adjust the magazines on the hallway table, positioning herself where she could hear through the partially open door without being obviously eavesdropping. She'd told herself she was just making sure Gerald wasn't in the middle of an important call that she'd be interrupting. It was a thin justification, but Luna had stopped caring about the ethics of collecting information from people who'd never extended ethical consideration to her. "I understand your concerns, Richard, but the board's expectations don't change the reality of the situation," Gerald had been saying, his voice carrying the particular weariness of someone repeating themselves. "Logan's performance has been affected, and we need to address it before it becomes a larger problem." Luna had frozen, her hand stilling on the magazine she'd been pretending to straighten. They were talking about Logan. She should definitely leave. This was clearly a private business discussion, but her feet wouldn't move. "Yes, his numbers are still good," Gerald had continued, "but I've watched that young man for 7 years now. I know when something's eating at him, and this situation has been festering for months. Ever since that incident with the paternity claim." Luna's breath had caught in her throat. Paternity claim? Someone had approached Logan claiming he'd fathered their child. "The lawyers handled it, of course," Gerald said, his tone dismissive. "The paternity test proved conclusively that the child wasn't Logan's." The woman eventually admitted she'd been involved with several men during the relevant time frame and had simply hoped Logan was the father because of his financial resources. Classic opportunist situation. There had been a pause while the person on the other end, Richard apparently, had responded. No legal exposure," Gerald had replied. "We got ahead of it quickly, had our legal team deal with everything before it could become public." The woman signed a non-disclosure agreement in exchange for a settlement that was frankly more generous than she deserved. The whole thing should have been closed and forgotten. Another pause. Luna had edged slightly closer to the door, straining to hear every word. "That's exactly the problem," Gerald had said, frustration creeping into his voice. Logan should have moved on by now, but instead he's become withdrawn, questioning things. He's been making comments about, "What if there were others?" and "What if I missed something important?" He's apparently concerned that his lifestyle in his 20s might have produced consequences he's unaware of. Gerald's next words had hit Luna like a physical blow. "The price situation is untenable, Richard. Ever since that woman showed up 3 months ago claiming to have his child, Logan's been distracted. He's questioning decisions he made years ago, wondering if there are other potential children out there he doesn't know about. It's affecting his focus, his decision-making. He's become emotionally volatile in a way that's completely unlike him." Luna's heart had been hammering so hard she'd worried Gerald might hear it through the wall. Another woman, 3 months ago, claiming to have Logan's child. The claim had been false, but it had shaken Logan badly enough that he was still dealing with the aftermath months later. "I know he's 32 years old and technically capable of managing his own personal life," Gerald had said with exasperation, "but Logan's like a son to me. I've mentored him since he joined Vanguard fresh out of business school. I'm not going to stand by and watch him self-destruct over guilt about youthful indiscretions that may not even exist." The person on the other end must have asked a question, because Gerald had continued. He's convinced himself that he was careless and irresponsible in his mid-20s, that there might be women he hurt, children he abandoned unknowingly. The false claim triggered something in him, some kind of crisis about his character and choices. He's been doing this thing where he questions every relationship he had during that period, wondering if he missed signs that women were trying to reach him. Luna had pressed her hand against the wall to steady herself. Logan was questioning his past relationships, wondering if he'd missed signs that women were trying to reach him. The timing matched. 6 years ago, Logan would have been 26, squarely in the period he was apparently reassessing. "I've tried to reassure him that the lawyers would have found any legitimate claims," Gerald had said. "We have systems in place precisely for this kind of situation. If there were other women with actual paternity issues, they would have surfaced by now." But Logan can't seem to let it go. Luna's mind had been racing, trying to process the information. 3 months ago, some woman had approached Logan claiming he'd fathered her child. The claim had been investigated and disproven. But the incident had triggered a crisis in Logan, made him start questioning whether there might be other consequences from his past that he was unaware of. The false claim meant Logan had been dealing with lawyers, paternity tests, investigations into his personal history. It meant he'd been confronted with the possibility of having a child he'd never known about. It meant he'd been forced to examine his own behavior and choices from years ago. And apparently that examination had left him shaken and full of doubt. Luna had tried to imagine what that must have been like for Logan. Being approached by someone claiming you'd fathered their child, going through the process of determining paternity, discovering the claim was false, but being left with questions about whether there might be other children out there from other relationships. The emotional whiplash must have been intense. But more than that, if Logan was questioning whether he'd missed signs that women were trying to reach him 6 years ago, did that mean he genuinely hadn't known about Luna's attempts to contact him? Had someone intercepted her communications without Logan's knowledge? The possibility had been almost too much to hope for. Luna had spent 6 years believing Logan had consciously rejected her and Claire, that he'd known she was pregnant and had chosen to threaten her with harassment charges rather than acknowledge his responsibility. The pain of that rejection had shaped everything about Luna's life since. But what if it hadn't been Logan's choice? What if someone else had made decisions on his behalf? "The young man is torturing himself with hypotheticals," Gerald had said, his tone somewhere between sympathy and frustration. "He keeps asking, what if there were others I don't know about, and what if I missed something important because I was too focused on my career?" He's even suggested hiring investigators to track down women he was involved with years ago, just to confirm there are no unknown children. Luna had felt tears stinging her eyes. Logan was questioning. Logan was concerned he might have missed something. Logan cared about the possibility of unknown children enough to consider hiring investigators. This wasn't the behavior of a man who'd callously rejected a pregnant woman. This was someone who would have wanted to know. Someone who would have taken responsibility if he'd been given the chance. I talked him out of the investigator idea, Gerald had continued. Told him it would be invasive and potentially create legal liability. If he starts tracking down former partners asking about paternity, he's opening himself up to all kinds of problems. Better to let sleeping dogs lie. Let sleeping dogs lie. Gerald had actively discouraged Logan from searching for potential children. Had convinced him that looking into his past relationships would create more problems than it solved. Luna's hands had clenched into fists. Gerald wasn't protecting Logan. He was protecting Vanguard Industries from potential complications. He was managing Logan's personal life the same way he'd manage any business risk, by containing it, minimizing exposure, and preventing anything messy from surfacing. He's questioning his character, Gerald had said, wondering if he was the kind of man who abandoned responsibilities without realizing it. The guilt is eating at him even though there's nothing concrete to feel guilty about. That's why I'm convinced he needs a stabilizing relationship, something to ground him and give him perspective. Gerald's tone had shifted, becoming more businesslike. That's where Miranda Colton comes in. You remember her, daughter of the Colton family, sits on the boards of 3 major corporations. She and Logan worked together on that environmental initiative last year, and they got along well. Good family, excellent connections, sharp mind for business. Luna had heard Gerald moving around his office, probably pacing while he talked. Miranda's exactly what Logan needs right now, Gerald had continued. Someone stable, someone from his own world who understands the pressures of his position, someone who can help him stop dwelling on the past and focus on building a future. She's interested. I've spoken with her father, and the families would be well matched. Arranged. Gerald was arranging a relationship for Logan like it was a business merger. Luna had felt sick listening to it. I know you think I'm overstepping, Gerald had said, apparently responding to something Richard had said, but Logan's parents are gone. His sister lives overseas, and I'm the closest thing to family he has in this city. Someone needs to look out for his best interests, and right now his best interests involve moving forward rather than backwards. The patronizing tone in Gerald's voice had made Luna's jaw clench. He was treating Logan like a child who needed guidance rather than an adult capable of making his own decisions. Gerald had decided what Logan needed and was orchestrating events. To achieve that outcome, regardless of what Logan actually wanted, Miranda will be seated next to Logan at the gala next week, Gerald had said with satisfaction. I've arranged it. She's aware of the situation, knows Logan's been going through something difficult and needs support. She's prepared to be patient and understanding. The gala is the perfect setting, Gerald had continued, warming to his subject. Formal but not too intimate, public enough that Logan will maintain his composure, private enough for meaningful conversation. Miranda knows how to draw people out, without being pushy. By the end of the evening, I expect Logan will be in a much better place emotionally, and if things progress naturally from there, even better. Luna had felt rage building in her chest, hot and sharp. Gerald was manipulating Logan's life like he was moving pieces on a chessboard. He'd decided Logan needed to stop questioning his past, so he was providing a distraction in the form of an appropriate woman from an appropriate family. He was managing Logan's emotional crisis by trying to redirect his focus toward an acceptable future relationship. I'll have this wrapped up by the end of the gala, Gerald had said with confidence. Logan will spend the evening with Miranda, remember why he should be looking forward, instead of backward, and hopefully this whole situation will finally resolve itself. Then we can get back to business without Logan's personal crisis affecting his performance. Wrapped up. Gerald was treating Logan's genuine emotional struggle like an inconvenient problem that needed tidying. The false paternity claim had cracked something open in Logan, made him confront uncomfortable questions about his past and his character. Instead of allowing Logan to process those feelings, Gerald was trying to shut the whole thing down by pushing him toward a new relationship that would distract him from his doubts. Yes, I know some people would say it's not my place, Gerald had said, but Logan's well-being directly affects Vanguard Industries. He's being groomed as my successor. I can't have him derailed by guilt over hypothetical situations that probably don't exist. Better to give him something concrete and positive to focus on. The call had apparently been winding down. Gerald had made a few more comments about board politics and quarterly projections, then said goodbye and ended the call. Luna had stood frozen in the hallway, her mind churning with everything she'd just heard. She'd needed to move. Gerald might come out of his office and find her standing there. But her body wouldn't cooperate. The implications of what she'd overheard were too massive to process. While simultaneously worrying about being caught eavesdropping, the pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. 6 years ago, Luna had sent a letter to Logan at Vanguard Industries, explaining her pregnancy and asking him to contact her. The letter had been returned unopened with a typed note claiming Logan was engaged and wanted no contact. Gerald Hastings had been Logan's mentor for 7 years, which meant he'd been in that role 6 years ago when Luna's letter arrived. Gerald, who'd just admitted to actively managing Logan's personal life for his own good. Gerald, who believed it was his responsibility to protect Logan from messy complications. Gerald, who'd convinced Logan not to hire investigators to search for potential unknown children because it would create legal liability. Gerald had intercepted Luna's letter. Luna was suddenly certain of it. The typed note, the formal language, the threat of harassment charges, none of it sounded like Logan. It sounded like a corporate legal department. It sounded like someone managing risk. Logan had never seen her letter. He'd never known Luna was trying to reach him. He'd never been given the choice to step up or step away. Someone else had made that choice for him. The engagement to Rebecca Sullivan that had been referenced in the note, Luna now understood the timing. According to the office gossip she'd overheard months ago, Logan had been engaged to Rebecca around that time, but he'd called it off before they'd even set a wedding date. Had the engagement been real when Luna's letter arrived, or had Gerald exaggerated its status to make the rejection seem more definitive? Either way, Gerald had intervened. He'd decided Luna was an inappropriate complication and had removed her from Logan's life without Logan's knowledge or consent. He'd probably justified it as protecting Logan's future, preventing a gold digger from derailing his career, saving him from the consequences of a youthful mistake. Gerald had stolen Logan's chance to know his daughter. He'd stolen Claire's chance to have a father. He'd stolen Luna's chance to co-parent with someone who might have actually wanted to be involved. And he'd done it all while believing he was acting in Logan's best interests. Luna had stood in that hallway, hands shaking with rage, as 6 years of pain and struggle crystallized into white-hot fury. She'd raised Claire alone because she'd believed Logan had rejected them. She'd scraped by financially, sacrificed her career, worked herself to exhaustion, all while believing that Claire's father knew she existed and had chosen not to care. But Logan hadn't known. He'd been kept in the dark by someone who'd decided he knew better, who'd taken it upon himself to make choices about Logan's personal life without consultation or consent. The false paternity claim 3 months ago had affected Logan so deeply that he was still struggling with it months later. He was questioning his past, worrying about potential children he might have abandoned, unknowingly feeling guilty about possibilities that Gerald insisted didn't exist. Meanwhile, Logan's actual child was growing up miles away, being raised by a woman who cleaned his office every week while he remained completely oblivious. The cruelty of it was staggering. Logan was torturing himself with hypotheticals, while the reality stood right in front of him unrecognized. He was wondering if he'd missed signs that women were trying to reach him while Gerald actively concealed the truth. And now Gerald was manipulating Logan's emotional crisis by pushing him toward Miranda Colton at the upcoming gala, trying to wrap up Logan's questioning and doubt by providing a distraction in the form of an appropriate relationship. Luna's rage had burned through her like fire, consuming the hurt and self-doubt she'd carried for 6 years. This wasn't about her anymore. This was about Claire, about Logan's right to know his daughter, about Gerald Hastings' assumption that he had the authority to make life-altering decisions for other people. Gerald thought he could orchestrate Logan's life, seat him next to Miranda Colton at the gala, and resolve Logan's emotional crisis through manipulation and distraction. He thought he could keep controlling the narrative, managing risks, and protecting Vanguard Industries from complications. He was wrong. Luna had made a decision at that moment. Standing in the darkened hallway outside Gerald Hastings' office, she would go to that gala. She would walk in wearing a dress that commanded attention, with her daughter, Logan's daughter, by her side. She would make it impossible for Logan to remain ignorant. She would force Gerald to confront the consequences of his interference. Not for revenge, though the satisfaction would be sweet, but because Logan deserved to know the truth. Because Claire deserved a father who actually knew she existed. Because Gerald Hastings needed to understand that people's lives weren't his to manage like corporate assets. Luna had finished her shift that night, moving on autopilot, her mind already planning. The gala was in 2 weeks. She needed a dress, something that would make her impossible to overlook. She needed childcare figured out, except no, she wouldn't need childcare. Claire was coming with her. Luna wanted Logan to see his daughter, to recognize his own features in her face, to understand immediately what he'd been denied. The dismissed cleaning lady was about to become very visible, and Gerald Hastings' carefully orchestrated gala was about to become something entirely different from what he'd planned. Luna had spent 6 years believing she'd been rejected. Now she knew the truth was more complicated. Logan hadn't rejected her. He'd never been given the chance to choose. That knowledge didn't erase the pain of the past 6 years, but it changed everything about how Luna understood what had happened. More importantly, it changed what happened next. Gerald Hastings had interfered in Luna's life 6 years ago, making decisions he had no right to make. Now Luna was going to interfere right back. She was going to walk into his perfectly orchestrated event and detonate the truth he'd been hiding. Let him try to manage that risk. Let him try to contain that complication. Let him try to explain to Logan why he'd hidden the existence of Logan's daughter for 6 years. Luna's fury had crystallized into determination so fierce it felt like armor. She'd spent 3 years being dismissed in Vanguard's halls, absorbing information and building power from the margins. She'd built a business that was succeeding beyond her initial hopes. She'd proven she didn't need Logan or Gerald or anyone else to validate her worth. But Claire deserved a father, and Logan deserved the truth, and Gerald Hastings deserved to face the consequences of playing God with other people's lives. 2 weeks. Luna had 2 weeks to prepare, 2 weeks to find the perfect dress, to steel herself for the confrontation, to decide exactly what she would say when she walked through those doors with Claire's hand in hers. The gala was going to be very different from what Gerald Hastings had planned, and Luna was going to make sure of it. The morning after overhearing Gerald's phone conversation, Luna had woken up with absolute clarity. The decision that had formed in the darkened hallway of Vanguard Industries had solidified overnight into unshakable conviction. She would attend the annual charity gala, not as a guest invited through proper channels, not with anyone's permission or approval. She would simply show up, walk through those doors, and force the truth into the open. Luna had sat at her kitchen table with her first coffee of the morning, watching dawn light filter through the window, while Claire still slept. Her laptop was open to the Vanguard Industries website, displaying details about the upcoming gala. The event was being held at the Grandview Hotel, the same venue where Luna and Logan had met 6 years ago. The symmetry felt intentional, like the universe offering her a chance to close a circle that had been left devastatingly open. For 6 years, Luna had operated according to rules that other people had established. She'd accepted Gerald's rejection letter as final. She'd believed Logan's silence meant indifference. She'd internalized the message that she was an inconvenient complication, someone to be managed and dismissed rather than acknowledged and valued. She'd built her life around the assumption that she'd been unwanted, that Claire had been unwanted, that they were better off dismissed. But everything had changed with that overheard conversation. Logan hadn't known. He'd never been given the choice. Gerald had intercepted Luna's desperate letter and made decisions that weren't his to make, all while convincing himself he was protecting Logan from a gold digger who would derail his promising career. The rage Luna felt toward Gerald was clean and sharp. But underneath it was something more complicated, a realization that Logan had been a victim of Gerald's manipulation too, not in the same way Luna had been. Logan hadn't spent 6 years struggling financially, raising a child, alone, wondering why he'd been deemed unworthy of basic consideration. But he'd been denied information he had a right to know. He'd been treated like a child who couldn't make his own decisions. He'd had his daughter hidden from him by someone who claimed to have his best interests at heart. Luna's decision to attend the gala wasn't about confrontation for its own sake. It was about reclaiming an agency that had been stolen from her. It was about stepping out of the role that had been assigned to her, the dismissed cleaning lady, the woman who didn't matter, the complication that had been successfully managed and contained. She was done accepting other people's definitions of who she was supposed to be, done operating in the margins, done allowing her existence and Claire's existence to be erased for the convenience of powerful men who thought they knew better. Luna would attend the gala on her own terms. She would walk in dressed like she belonged there, with her daughter beside her, and she would make it impossible for anyone to look away or dismiss what they saw. Luna had spent 6 years making herself smaller. It had started immediately after receiving the rejection letter, when the weight of pregnancy and poverty had crushed her confidence into something manageable but diminished. She'd stopped speaking up in conversations, stopped asserting her opinions, stopped taking up space in ways that might draw attention. The pattern had intensified when she'd started working at Vanguard Industries. Luna had perfected the art of moving through the building like a ghost, silent footsteps, averted eyes, responses limited to yes and excuse me and thank you. She'd trained herself to become furniture, to exist without disturbing the important, people whose worlds she briefly intersected with during her shifts. Part of it had been survival. People who weren't noticed didn't get fired for being inconvenient. They didn't attract the wrong kind of attention from supervisors or co-workers. They did their jobs competently and went home without complications. But part of it had been internalized shame. Luna had believed on some level that she deserved to be overlooked, that she'd been foolish to think someone like Logan Price could genuinely want her, that her pregnancy had been a consequence of her own poor judgment, and therefore something she should bear quietly without burdening anyone else. She'd accepted the narrative that she was less educated than the people, whose offices she cleaned, despite having the same MBA many of them held. Less valuable despite working just as hard, less worthy of respect or consideration simply because of the uniform she wore and the economic circumstances she'd been forced into. Every time an executive had talked over her or through her, Luna had accepted it. Every time Logan had walked past without recognition, she'd told herself it made sense that he wouldn't remember someone as insignificant as she'd been to him. Every time she'd felt the sting of being treated as dismissed, she'd swallowed the hurt and reminded herself that this was the price of survival. But that acceptance had been poisonous. It had seeped into how Luna saw herself, how she moved through the world, how she allowed other people to treat her. She'd become complicit in her own erasure, convincing herself that being overlooked was safer than the alternative. Overhearing Gerald's conversation had shattered that acceptance. Luna suddenly saw clearly what she'd been doing to herself. She'd been carrying shame for a rejection that hadn't even come from the person she'd thought rejected her. She'd been accepting less than status based on lies and manipulation, and one man's arrogant assumption that he knew what was best for everyone involved. 6 years of that pattern was enough, more than enough. Luna was done shrinking herself to fit into spaces that had never been designed to accommodate her. Done accepting that her worth was determined by other people's willingness to see her. Done allowing her daughter to grow up, watching her mother apologize for existing. The dismissal ended now. The silence ended now. The acceptance of being less than ended now. Luna was reclaiming the power that had been taken from her 6 years ago, one decision at a time. And the first decision was to show up at that gala as herself, fully visible, unapologetic, impossible to ignore. The decision to bring Claire to the gala had been immediate and non-negotiable. Luna could have arranged childcare. Mrs. Patterson next door would happily watch Claire for the evening. But Luna didn't want to leave her daughter behind. Claire was the whole point of this. Claire was living, breathing evidence that Luna had survived what should have broken her, that she'd built something beautiful from the wreckage of her relationship with Logan, that being rejected and dismissed and rendered overlooked hadn't actually destroyed her. It had just forced her to become stronger, more resourceful, more fiercely protective of what mattered. Luna wanted Logan to see Claire, wanted him to look at his daughter's face and recognize his own features staring back at him, wanted him to understand, in one devastating moment of clarity, exactly what he'd been denied. Not just the abstract idea of a child, but this specific, remarkable little person with his eyes and his stubborn chin and his quick intelligence. More than that, Luna wanted Claire to be part of this moment, not as a prop or a weapon, but as a participant in her own story. Claire deserved to meet her father eventually, and while a crowded gala wasn't the ideal setting for that introduction, it was the setting Luna had to work with. Claire deserved to see her mother walking into a room full of important people, with her head high, claiming space that had been denied to both of them. Luna wanted her daughter to learn, even at 5 years old, that you didn't have to accept other people's assessment of your worth, that sometimes you had to make yourself seen even when the world wanted you to remain overlooked. That power wasn't something granted by permission, it was something you claimed for yourself. Bringing Claire meant complications. Luna would need to prepare her daughter for a long evening, explain why they were getting dressed up and going to a fancy party, and navigate keeping a 5-year-old comfortable and happy in an adult environment. But those were manageable complications compared to the alternative of leaving her daughter behind while Luna confronted Logan alone. They would walk in together, Luna and Claire, mother and daughter, living proof that Gerald's interference 6 years ago hadn't actually protected anyone. It had just condemned 2 people to unnecessary struggle while leaving a third person in ignorant grief over hypothetical children that were actually real. Luna had gone dress shopping 3 days after overhearing Gerald's conversation. She'd left Claire with Mrs. Patterson and taken the bus to the downtown shopping district, where boutiques displayed clothing designed for people with disposable income. The kind of stores Luna normally walked past without entering, knowing everything inside cost more than her weekly paycheck. But this was different. This required investment. Luna needed a dress that would make her impossible to overlook, that would transform her from the dismissed cleaning lady into someone who commanded attention the moment she walked into a room. She needed armor that looked like elegance. The boutiques had been intimidating. Sales associates had sized Luna up with practiced eyes, making quick judgments about whether she was a serious customer or someone just browsing. Luna had fought the urge to apologize for taking up their time. She'd reminded herself that she was a business owner now, that Green Solutions had made more money in the past 2 months than Luna used to earn in 6, that she had every right to shop in these stores even if they made her uncomfortable. She'd tried on 14 dresses before finding the one. Most had been wrong in obvious ways, too formal, too casual, wrong color, wrong fit. A few had been almost right, but not quite. Luna had been starting to despair when the sales associate had brought out one more option. "This just came in," the woman had said, her tone shifting from professionally polite to genuinely interested. "I think it might be perfect for you." The dress was emerald green silk that seemed to capture and reflect light like water. It had a fitted bodice that emphasized Luna's waist, a neckline that was elegant without being revealing, and a full skirt that fell to the floor in waves of rich fabric. The color made Luna's skin glow and brought out depths in her eyes she'd forgotten existed. Luna had stepped out of the fitting room and stood in front of the 3-way mirror, barely recognizing herself. This wasn't the exhausted single mother in discount store jeans. This wasn't the cleaning lady in a shapeless blue uniform. This was someone who looked like she belonged at charity galas, someone who could walk into the Grandview Hotel without anyone questioning her presence. "That's the one," the sales associate had said with certainty. "You look absolutely stunning." Luna had checked the price tag and felt her stomach drop. The dress cost $850, more than Luna's monthly grocery budget, more than she'd ever spent on a single item of clothing in her entire life. It was an absurd, irresponsible amount of money to spend on something she'd wear once. She'd bought it anyway. Luna had paid with her credit card, wincing internally at the balance she was carrying forward, reminding herself that the Riverside development contract meant she could actually afford this now. The dress was an investment in reclaiming her identity. It was worth the cost. Finding a dress for Claire had been easier but equally important. Luna had taken her daughter to a children's boutique the day after purchasing her own dress, determined to find something that would make Claire feel special while matching Luna's emerald silk. Claire had been delighted by the whole expedition. At 5 years old, she was beginning to develop her own aesthetic preferences, and those preferences involved anything that sparkled or shimmered or caught light in interesting ways. She'd gravitated immediately toward dresses with sequins, tulle, elaborate bows. Luna had steered her toward a section with more age-appropriate formal wear, and that's where they'd found it, a miniature version of Luna's dress in the same emerald green silk, but with a child's shorter skirt and tiny silver stars embroidered across the fabric. The stars caught light when Claire moved, creating little sparks that made her daughter gasp with joy. "Mama, it has stars," Claire had squealed, running her small fingers over the embroidery. "It's like a princess dress. Do you want to try it on?" Luna had asked, her heart swelling with love for this easily delighted little person. Claire nodded enthusiastically. In the fitting room, Luna had helped her daughter into the dress, carefully zipping up the back and adjusting the skirt. Claire had stood on the small platform in front of the mirror, turning slowly to watch the stars catch light, her face glowing with wonder. "We match," Claire had whispered, looking at Luna's reflection beside her own. "We look like queens." Luna had blinked back tears. "We do, baby. We absolutely do." The dress had cost $200, still more than Luna would normally spend on children's clothing that Claire would outgrow within months. But watching her daughter's face light up with joy, seeing them standing together in matching emerald dresses that made them both feel transformed, Luna hadn't hesitated. They would walk into that gala together, mother and daughter, dressed like they belonged in that world, even if that world had tried to exclude them. Claire would feel special and beautiful. Luna would feel powerful, and together they would be undeniable. In the days leading up to the gala, Claire had talked about nothing but the fancy party they were attending. Luna hadn't explained the full context. How could she to a 5-year-old? Instead, she'd kept it simple. They were going to a special event where Mama used to work, and they'd get to wear their beautiful dresses and see a fancy hotel. Claire had accepted this explanation without question, too excited about the dresses and the adventure to worry about adult complications she couldn't understand. She'd tried on her emerald dress 3 times in the past week, twirling in front of Luna's bedroom mirror and making the silver stars sparkle. She'd practiced her fancy party manners, asking Luna to teach her how to shake hands properly and which fork to use first at dinner. "Will there be dancing?" Claire had asked one evening while Luna was preparing dinner. "Probably," Luna had replied, stirring pasta with one hand while checking her phone with the other. "Will you dance with me?" "Of course, baby. We'll dance together." Claire had smiled with pure contentment, already humming to herself and doing little spins across the kitchen floor. She had no idea that this party represented anything more than a fun evening out with her mother. She didn't understand that they would be walking into a room full of people who'd overlooked Luna for years. She couldn't comprehend that her father, a man she'd only heard about in vague, carefully edited stories, would be there, seeing her for the first time. Luna was grateful for that innocence. Claire didn't need to carry the weight of adult complications. She could just be excited about a pretty dress and a fancy party, unburdened by the emotional landmines Luna would be navigating. But Luna also wondered what it would be like to see the evening through Claire's eyes, to walk into that ballroom feeling nothing but wonder at the chandeliers and curiosity about the food and delight at getting to stay up past bedtime, to exist without the layers of hurt and anger and hope that Luna would be carrying with her. "Mama," Claire had asked one night while Luna was tucking her into bed, "why are we going to this party?" Luna had paused, choosing her words carefully. Because sometimes you have to do things that are a little scary and a little exciting. And because I want people to see how wonderful you are. Will there be other kids there? Probably not many. It's mostly a grown-up party. But you'll have me, and we'll make it fun together. Claire nodded, satisfied with that answer. I can't wait to wear my star dress. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. As the gala approached, Luna's emotions had become increasingly complicated and difficult to untangle. The anger was straightforward, fury at Gerald for interfering 6 years ago, rage at a system that had allowed one man to make life-altering decisions for other people without consequences. That anger was clean and justified, something Luna could hold on to without guilt. The pride was newer, but equally strong. Pride in what she'd built, despite every obstacle. Pride in raising Claire alone and doing it well. Pride in Green's solutions and the success she'd achieved through intelligence and determination. Pride in having the courage to walk into that gala and force herself to be seen after years of practiced dismissal. But underneath both the anger and the pride was something Luna didn't want to acknowledge. A small, stubborn spark of hope that she'd tried repeatedly to extinguish, but that refused to die. I hoped that maybe Logan had cared about her 6 years ago, that their night together had meant something real to him too, that if he'd known about her pregnancy, he would have stepped up and been the partner Luna had needed. Hope that when Logan saw Claire, he would want to be part of her life, that he would look at his daughter and feel the immediate love Luna had felt the moment Claire was born, that he would prove himself to be the kind of father Claire deserved. I hope that there could be some kind of reconciliation, not necessarily a romantic relationship. Luna didn't trust herself to hope for that, but maybe something where Logan acknowledged what had happened, where they could co-parent in some functional way, where Claire could know her father. Luna hated that hope. It felt dangerous, foolish, setting herself up for disappointment. She'd built a life that didn't require Logan's participation or approval. She and Claire were fine. More than fine. Why risk that stability by hoping for more? But the hope persisted anyway, a quiet voice in the back of Luna's mind whispering possibilities she tried not to listen to. What if Logan's response to learning about Claire was everything Luna had once hoped it would be? What if Gerald's interference was the only reason they'd been separated? And removing that barrier opened possibilities Luna had stopped allowing herself to consider. Late at night, when Claire was asleep and Luna sat alone with her thoughts, the hope became harder to ignore. She would replay that night 6 years ago in her mind, looking for evidence that would support the narrative she wanted to believe. Logan's warmth, his genuine interest in her ideas, the way he'd looked at her like she mattered. Had all of that been performance? Or had it been real? The tenderness in how he'd touched her, the promises he'd whispered about wanting to see her again, the vulnerability he'd shown when talking about his fears and hopes. Could someone fake all of that? Luna had spent 6 years believing Logan had callously discarded her, that he'd gotten what he wanted for one night and then disappeared, unconcerned about consequences. But that characterization had never quite fit with the man she'd spent hours talking to, the man who'd been genuinely interested in her thesis work, who'd challenged her thinking while respecting her intelligence. What if Logan really hadn't known about her attempts to contact him? What if he'd wondered what happened to her? What if he'd tried to find her and failed because Luna had legally changed her name and moved to a different part of the city? The overheard conversation suggested Logan had been deeply affected by the false paternity claim. He'd been withdrawn and questioning for months afterward, worried that he might have unknowingly abandoned responsibilities. That didn't sound like someone who wouldn't have cared about Luna's pregnancy if he'd known about it. Luna allowed herself to construct elaborate scenarios where Logan had tried to find her, where he'd called the number she'd given him only to discover it disconnected. After Luna had been forced to give up her cell phone when money got tight, where he'd tried to reach her through their mutual connection, Dr. Williamson, only to learn that Luna had fallen out of touch after becoming pregnant, where he'd searched for Luna Thorne without knowing she'd changed her name to Luna Rhodes. These scenarios were probably fantasies. Luna knew that. The more likely reality was that Logan had moved on quickly after their night together, that she'd been one of many casual encounters for. Him, that he genuinely hadn't given her another thought until the false paternity claim had triggered his current crisis of conscience. But the hope refused to be completely extinguished. Because if there had been a misunderstanding, if Logan had been kept in the dark, if Gerald's interference was the only reason they'd been separated, then maybe everything could be different now. Maybe Luna wasn't walking into that gala to deliver devastating news to a man who'd rejected her, but to reunite a father with a daughter he'd been denied the chance to know. Maybe, just maybe, the ending to this story didn't have to be bitter and painful. Maybe there was a possibility of healing, of connection, of building something good from the wreckage of the past 6 years. Luna tried not to hope for that. She steeled herself for disappointment, reminded herself that expectations led to heartbreak, prepared for Logan to be angry or defensive or indifferent when confronted with Claire's existence. But late at night, in the quiet darkness of her bedroom, Luna let herself hope anyway. Just a little. Just enough to make walking into that gala feel less like a confrontation and more like an opening, a chance, a possibility. She was done being a victim of other people's decisions, done accepting dismissal, done allowing fear to dictate her choices. Luna was reclaiming her power, one step at a time. And the first step was walking through those doors at the Grandview Hotel with her daughter's hand in hers, dressed in emerald silk, ready to be seen. Whatever happened after that, rejection, acceptance, anger, reconciliation, Luna would handle it. She'd survived worse. She'd built a life from nothing. She'd proven her resilience over and over again. Walking into that gala wasn't going to break her. It was going to transform her, and Claire, and possibly Logan too, if he was capable of rising to the moment. Luna fell asleep that night with her emerald dress hanging in her closet, Claire's matching dress hanging beside it, and a mixture of defiance and hope swirling in her chest. 2 more days until the gala. 2 more days until everything changed. She was ready. Luna's about to do something brave and terrifying. If you're rooting for her, if you understand what it takes to walk back into a space that rejected you and demand to be seen, smash that like button right now. Share this with someone who needs courage today. Someone who's been overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed. Someone who needs to see that reclaiming your power is always possible, even when it feels impossible. The hired car had turned onto the circular drive leading to the Grandview Hotel's entrance, and Luna's heart had immediately begun hammering against her ribs. She'd known intellectually what to expect. The gala was a high-profile charity event that attracted local media attention and society page coverage. But seeing it in person was overwhelming in a way she hadn't fully prepared for. The hotel's facade was illuminated with golden light that made the building glow against the darkening evening sky. A red carpet stretched from the street to the entrance, flanked by velvet, ropes and potted topiaries wrapped in white lights. Photographers clustered near the entrance, cameras flashing as guests emerged from luxury vehicles and posed briefly before entering. The crowd of attendees glittered with expensive jewelry and designer clothing, everyone dressed in their formal best. Luna had attended this same event 6 years ago, but she'd been so focused on Logan that night that she'd barely registered the spectacle surrounding them. Now, arriving alone with Claire, the elaborate production felt almost hostile in its excess. This was a display of wealth and status, a performance of belonging, to a world that had never been designed to include people like Luna. The car ahead of them, a sleek black Mercedes, had discharged its passengers, and now it was Luna's turn. The sedan she'd hired wasn't luxury class, just a reliable car service, but the driver had been professional and kind. He pulled up to the red carpet entrance and put the car in park. "Here we are, ma'am," he said, glancing at Luna in the rearview mirror. "Would you like me to come around and get the door?" Luna nodded, not trusting her voice. Her palms were sweating despite the car's air conditioning. This was it. The moment she'd been preparing for, planning for, building toward for 2 weeks. Once she stepped out of this car, there was no going back. She would be visible, undeniable, forcing herself into a space that had worked very hard to exclude her. Beside her, Claire had her face pressed against the window, eyes wide with wonder as she took in the scene. The lights, the red carpet, the elegantly dressed crowd. It must have looked like something, from a movie to a 5-year-old who'd grown up in their modest apartment. "Mama, it's so pretty," Claire had breathed, her voice filled with awe. "Look at all the sparkly dresses, and the lights, and, oh, are those real flowers?" Luna had looked where Claire was pointing. Enormous arrangements of white roses and orchids flanked the entrance, their petals perfect and pristine, the kind of flowers that cost more than Luna's weekly grocery budget. "Yes, baby. Those are real. Can we smell them? Maybe on the way out." The driver had come around and opened Luna's door. The sounds of the evening rushed in, music from inside the hotel, the low murmur of conversation, camera shutters clicking, heels on pavement. Luna had taken a deep breath, steadying herself. "Are we really going inside?" Claire had asked, suddenly shy now that the moment had arrived. She'd shrunk back slightly in her seat, overwhelmed by the grandeur. Luna had turned to face her daughter fully, taking both of Claire's small hands in hers. She'd needed to see Claire's face, to remind herself why she was doing this. Not for revenge, not even primarily for herself, but for this little girl who deserved to know her father, who deserved to have all the opportunities. That came with being Logan Price's daughter, who deserved not to be erased from her own story. Claire looked beautiful in her emerald dress with the silver stars. Luna had pinned her daughter's dark hair back with delicate clips, leaving soft curls framing her face. The hotel's exterior lighting caught the grey-blue of Claire's eyes, Logan's exact shade, and made them seem to glow. It was impossible to look at Claire and not see Logan. The resemblance had always been there, but dressed up and in this particular lighting, it was striking. Claire had his eyes, his chin, the same shape to her face. Even the way she tilted her head when she was uncertain, that was pure Logan, a gesture. Luna had watched him make 1,000 times during her nights cleaning his office. But Claire was also entirely herself. Her joy was her own, untainted by adult complications. Her excitement about the pretty dresses and sparkly lights was genuine and uncomplicated. She didn't know she was about to meet her father. She didn't understand that this evening would change everything. She was just a 5-year-old girl who got to wear a princess dress and go to a fancy party with her mama. Luna's heart had swelled with fierce love and protectiveness. Whatever happened tonight, she would make sure Claire felt safe and loved. She wouldn't let her daughter become collateral damage in adult confrontations. If things went badly, if Logan reacted poorly, Luna would shield Claire from the worst of it. But looking at her daughter's face, seeing Logan's features mixed with her own, Luna had also felt a surge of righteous determination. This child existed. She was real and wonderful and remarkable. And Logan deserved to know her, even if the knowledge came with complications he hadn't asked for. Luna had squeezed Claire's hands gently, anchoring both of them in the moment. "Yes, baby," she'd said, her voice steadier than she felt. "We're really going inside. Will it be fun? It will be an adventure. There might be parts that are boring for you, lots of grown-up talking, but I promise we'll make it fun together, okay? And if you get tired or want to leave, you tell me and we'll go. This is our evening. We're in charge." Claire had nodded, reassured by Luna's confidence even though Luna was faking at least half of it. "Okay, Mama, I'm ready." Luna had stepped out of the car first, her emerald dress pooling around her feet as she stood. The evening air had been crisp, carrying the scent of those expensive flowers and something else. Possibility, maybe, or just the particular smell of autumn in the city. The golden light from the hotel had washed over Luna, and for a moment she'd closed her eyes, centering herself. 6 years. 6 years since she'd walked through these same doors on Logan's arm, naive and hopeful and entirely unprepared for how badly things could go wrong. 6 years of struggling and surviving and building herself into someone stronger than the girl in the silver dress had ever been. Luna wasn't that girl anymore. She was a mother, a business owner, a woman who'd learned to fight for what mattered. She'd earned her place in this world through effort and resilience, not through family connections or inherited wealth. And tonight, she was claiming that place. Luna had opened her eyes and reached back into the car to help Claire out. Her daughter had taken her hand and stepped onto the red carpet, immediately distracted by the texture under her fancy shoes. "It's so soft," Claire had said, bouncing slightly. "Why is the carpet red?" "To make it special, to show people that something important is happening here." "Are we important?" Luna had looked down at her daughter, at this perfect small person who'd given Luna's life meaning and purpose. "Yes, sweetheart, we absolutely are." Together, Luna and Claire had walked toward the hotel entrance. Each step on that red carpet felt weighted with significance. Luna had kept her head high, her shoulders back, channeling a confidence that was only partly genuine, but becoming more real with every step. The night air had that particular quality of early November, cool but not cold, carrying the smell of distant wood smoke mixed with the urban scents of exhaust and expensive perfume. The hotel's golden glow had transformed everything into something almost magical. Luna understood why Claire was enchanted. Even knowing what lay ahead, even carrying the weight of 6 years, of hurt and anger, Luna could appreciate the beauty of the moment. This was the same entrance she'd walked through 6 years ago, but everything else was different. Then, she'd been worried about saying the right things, making good impressions, fitting into a world she didn't quite understand. Now, she didn't care about fitting in. She was here to disrupt, to force truth into spaces that preferred comfortable lies, to make herself and her daughter impossible to ignore. The photographers had started to notice them. A few cameras had swung in their direction, operators probably wondering if Luna was someone important enough to photograph. She wasn't wearing recognizable designer labels or major jewelry. She'd arrived in a hired car rather than a limousine. But there was something about the way she carried herself, something about the striking emerald dress and the matching child beside her, that drew attention. Luna had ignored the cameras, focusing instead on the entrance ahead. The doorman, the same young man who'd opened doors for her when she'd left the building after late-night cleaning shifts, was already reaching for the handle. Luna had taken Claire's hand firmly in her own, feeling the small fingers curl trustingly around hers. That physical connection had grounded her, reminded her what this was about. She wasn't walking into this ballroom as a supplicant seeking approval. She was walking in as Claire's mother, Claire's protector, Claire's advocate. Everything else was secondary to that role. They'd crossed the threshold together. The hotel lobby had been transformed for the gala, more of those elaborate white flower arrangements, ice, sculptures catching light from crystal chandeliers, waiters circulating with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Classical music had floated from the ballroom beyond, something elegant and slightly melancholy. The doorman had held the door, his professional expression not changing as Luna passed. If he recognized her from her cleaning shifts, he gave no sign. Luna had walked past him without acknowledging him, playing the role of someone who belonged. Here, someone for whom doors were always held and deference was always given. Claire had been overwhelmed by the spectacle, her grip tightening on Luna's hand as she'd taken in the massive chandelier above them, the marble floors, the sweeping staircase that curved up to the second level. "It's like a castle," she'd whispered. "Kind of," Luna had agreed. "Just a castle full of people in fancy clothes instead of knights and dragons." "Are there any princesses?" Luna had looked down at her daughter and smiled. "You're the only one who matters." They'd walked deeper into the lobby, heading toward the ballroom entrance. The crowd had thickened here, clusters of people holding drinks, greeting each other with air kisses and practiced enthusiasm. Luna had recognized some faces from her time working at Vanguard Industries. Executives she'd cleaned up after, board members whose offices she'd vacuumed. None of them looked at her with recognition. Why would they? The cleaning lady and this woman in the emerald dress existed in completely different categories in their minds. But as Luna had moved through the crowd with Claire beside her, something had shifted. People had started to notice, not all at once, but gradually, like a wave moving through the room. Conversations had paused mid-sentence, heads had turned, eyes had tracked Luna's progress across the lobby. Luna had felt the weight of those gazes and heard the whispers starting to circulate. She'd kept her expression calm, neutral, refusing to acknowledge the attention with anything other than the slightest lift of her chin. Let them look, let them wonder. That was exactly what she'd come here for. "Who is that?" Someone had murmured nearby. "I don't know. Did you see her arrive? That dress is stunning." Custom, maybe. And the little girl, how sweet they match. But then, from somewhere to Luna's right, a different kind of whisper. A woman's voice, confused and slightly scandalized. "Wait, isn't that... Doesn't she work here? I swear I've seen her." Another voice, sharper, more certain. "Oh my God. That's the cleaning lady. From Vanguard. I've seen her emptying trash on the executive floor." The whispers had spread faster then, rippling through the crowd with the particular energy that scandal always generated. Luna had felt the change in the room's atmosphere, curiosity morphing into confusion, confusion shading into judgment. The cleaning lady? What is she doing here? Did someone invite her as charity? And she brought a child. That seems inappropriate. Maybe she crashed. Should someone call security? Luna had felt Claire press closer to her side, sensing the change. In the crowd's energy, even if she didn't understand what it meant. "Mama? Why are people staring?" "Because we look beautiful, baby." Sometimes people stare at beautiful things. It was a lie, or at least a partial truth. People were staring because Luna had violated an unspoken rule. She'd crossed a boundary between the world of service workers and the world of the people being served. She'd entered a space that wasn't meant for her, dressed in a way that suggested she belonged, bringing her daughter as if this were completely natural. The crowd's reaction was revealing. Not angry exactly. More bewildered, like Luna had broken a fundamental law of social physics. Cleaning ladies existed in blue uniforms, in empty offices after hours. They didn't wear designer dresses and walk red carpets with matching daughters. The cognitive dissonance was written across faces throughout the lobby. Luna had continued walking, ignoring the whispers, focusing on the ballroom entrance ahead. She'd known this would happen, had anticipated the shock, the confusion, the scandalized whispers. It was all part of forcing herself to be seen. You couldn't remain overlooked while simultaneously demanding attention. The discomfort of the crowd was proof that Luna was succeeding. Luna had straightened her spine, lifted her chin another degree, letting the emerald dress catch every source of light in the lobby. The silk had shimmered with each step, drawing eyes whether people wanted to look or not. She'd embodied the confidence she wanted Claire to learn, walking like she had every right to be here, like the crowd's judgment was their problem rather than hers. The emerald had been the perfect choice. It was bold without being garish, elegant without being safe. The color made a statement, demanded attention, refused to blend into the sea of predictable black gowns and navy suits. Luna looked like someone who mattered, someone whose presence required acknowledgement. She'd caught her reflection in one of the lobby's ornate mirrors as she'd passed. For just a moment, Luna had seen herself as the crowd must be seeing her, a striking woman in a stunning dress, holding the hand of an equally beautiful child, moving through the space with purpose and poise. Not a cleaning lady, not a struggling single mother, but someone who commanded respect simply by existing. The woman in the mirror looked powerful, confident, unafraid. Luna had held onto that image, letting it fuel her forward momentum. This was who she needed to be tonight. Not the overlooked woman who'd spent 3 years accepting dismissal and disrespect, but the woman who'd built a business from nothing, who'd survived what should have broken her, who'd raised a remarkable daughter alone and done it well. That woman deserved to walk into this ballroom. That woman belonged here just as much as anyone else, regardless of what job she'd held or what uniform she'd worn. As Luna had approached the ballroom entrance, something remarkable had happened. The crowd had begun to part. Not dramatically, not with any obvious coordination, but people had stepped aside, creating a path for Luna and Claire to walk through. Some had done it unconsciously, simply moving out of the way of Luna's determined forward progress. Others had done it deliberately, pulling back as if Luna carried something contagious. The effect had been the same either way. A clear path had opened through the crowd, leading directly to the ballroom doors. Luna had walked through it with her head high, Claire's hands secure in. hers, feeling like she was parting waters through sheer force of will. "Mama, why did everyone move?" Claire had whispered. "They're making room for us, baby. Because we're important." Claire had seemed satisfied with that explanation, too young to understand the complex social dynamics at play. Luna had been grateful for her daughter's innocence. Tonight would be confusing enough for Claire without having to explain why adults were behaving so strangely. They'd reached the ballroom entrance. 2 doormen stood there, checking invitations against a guest list. Luna's stomach had tightened. This was the moment where she might actually be turned away, where her bold entrance could come to an embarrassing halt. But the doorman had been thrown off balance by Luna's confidence and the crowd's reaction. One had automatically reached for the door handle, his training in hospitality, overriding his uncertainty about whether Luna was actually supposed to be there. The other had started to ask for her invitation, but Luna had already swept past Claire in tow, entering the ballroom before anyone could stop her. The ballroom had taken Luna's breath away, just as it had 6 years ago. The space was massive, with vaulted ceilings and windows stretching, floor to ceiling along one wall, offering views of the city lights. Crystal chandeliers hung at intervals, each one massive and glittering with hundreds of lights. The floor was polished wood, already filled with couples dancing to the live orchestra at the far end. Round tables draped in white linen surrounded the dance floor, each one decorated, with more of those elaborate white flower arrangements and flickering candles. Claire had gasped with pure delight, her earlier shyness forgotten. "Mama, look at the sparkly lights and the music. Can we dance?" "Soon, baby. First, let's walk around a bit." Claire had been completely captivated by the beauty of the space, craning her neck to look up at the chandeliers, pointing at the orchestra, watching the dancing couples with fascination. She was oblivious to the continued stares following Luna, to the whispers that had started up again, now that they were in the ballroom proper, to the complicated adult dynamics swirling around them. That obliviousness was a gift. Claire got to experience this evening as pure magic, pretty dresses and sparkly lights and music and dancing. She didn't need to know about her mother's racing heart, about the confrontation that was coming, about the man somewhere in this room who was about to discover he had a daughter. Luna had envied that innocence, even as she'd been grateful for it. To see the world through Claire's eyes, even for a moment, would have been a relief from the anxiety coursing through Luna's veins. Luna had been scanning the ballroom methodically, searching faces in the crowd. There were hundreds of people here, executives, board members, major donors, society figures. Finding Logan in this mass of formal wear and careful networking would take time, except it didn't. Because Luna's gaze had caught on a familiar figure near the bar, and in that same instant, that figure had looked up and their eyes had met across the crowded ballroom. Logan Price. Time had seemed to slow, the noise of the party fading to white static. Logan had been standing near the bar with a drink in his hand, engaged, in conversation with someone Luna didn't immediately recognize. He'd been looking toward the ballroom entrance, probably casually observing new arrivals the way people did at events like this. He'd seen Luna, and Luna had seen him. For a moment, just a heartbeat, just a fraction of a second, neither of them had moved. They'd simply stared at each other across the distance, separated by dancing couples and networking clusters but connected by a gaze that carried 6 years of history. Logan had gone completely still, frozen mid-gesture in whatever conversation he'd been having. His drink had hung forgotten in his hand, his body language suddenly rigid with shock. Even from across the ballroom, Luna had been able to see the color draining from his face, see his expression shifting from casual social pleasantness to stunned disbelief. He'd been talking to a woman, blonde, elegant, wearing a navy dress that screamed expensive taste. Miranda Colton, presumably, Gerald's chosen candidate for Logan's future. She'd been in the middle of saying something, gesturing with her champagne glass. Clearly unaware that Logan's attention had completely abandoned their conversation, Logan had stared at Luna with an expression that cycled rapidly through confusion and recognition. The context of the gala, 6 years ago, the woman he'd spent one night with, whose face had lingered in his memory even if he hadn't understood why. Luna's features, older now but unmistakable when he actually looked at her, really looked. Without the filter of a janitor's uniform and 3 years of trained dismissal, his eyes had widened as recognition solidified. Not immediate certainty, but dawning understanding. This was Luna Thorne, the woman from 6 years ago, standing in the ballroom where they'd first met, dressed in emerald silk, impossible and undeniable. Luna had held his gaze, refusing to look away, letting him see her clearly for the first time in 6 years. Not the girl in the silver dress he'd known briefly, not the overlooked cleaning lady he'd walked past without recognition, but Luna as she was now, strong, fierce, impossible to dismiss. Then Logan's eyes had shifted, moved from Luna's face downward, landing on the small figure standing beside her, landing on Claire. Luna had watched the moment happen in real time. Logan's gaze dropped to Claire, seeing his expression change as he registered the emerald dress matching Luna's. The small hand clasped in Luna's larger one, the grey-blue eyes that were looking around the ballroom with wonder. The colour that had drained from Logan's face hadn't returned. If anything, he'd gone even paler, his expression shifting from shock to something more complex, confusion, mixed with dawning comprehension, mixed with something that looked like hope or fear or both. His eyes had moved back and forth between Luna and Claire, comparing features, doing mental mathematics, processing information that his brain was probably screaming couldn't be true, but that his eyes were confirming was absolutely, undeniably real. Luna had seen the exact moment when recognition had hit. When Logan's gaze had locked onto Claire's eyes, his eyes, that particular shade of grey, blue that changed with the light, and understanding had crashed over him like a wave. Those were his eyes looking back at him from a 5-year-old girl's face. His chin, his features mixed with Luna's, creating someone entirely new but unmistakably connected to him. Logan's drink had slipped from his hand, hitting the floor with a crash that drew attention from nearby guests. Crystal shattering, liquid spreading across polished wood, Logan not even noticing, because he was still staring at Claire like she'd materialized from his imagination. Miranda Colton had jumped back from the spilled drink, looking annoyed and confused. "Logan, are you all right?" "What?" She'd followed his gaze across the ballroom, landing on Luna and Claire, her expression shifting to puzzlement. But Logan hadn't responded to her, hadn't acknowledged the broken glass at his feet, or the small crowd forming to see what had happened. He'd been locked onto Claire, his face cycling through emotions too quickly, for Luna to track them all: shock, disbelief, wonder, grief, hope, fear. His mouth had opened slightly, like he wanted to say something but couldn't find words. His hand had come up to his chest, pressed against his heart, like he was trying to keep it from breaking or escaping. From across the ballroom, Luna had watched Logan come undone. Movement in Luna's peripheral vision. Gerald Hastings pushed through the small crowd that had gathered around Logan's spilled drink. Gerald's face had been a mask of concern. Clearly he'd seen Logan's distress, and had come to investigate like the protective mentor he fancied himself. But then, Gerald's eyes had followed Logan's gaze, had landed on Luna, had registered her presence in the ballroom with immediate confusion. Why was the night shift cleaning lady here, dressed like a guest? Then Gerald's gaze had dropped on Claire, and Luna had watched his confusion morph into alarm, watched his expression shift as he'd made the same connections Logan had just made, watched the colour drain from his face as he'd realized exactly what he was looking at. Gerald had understood at that moment what Luna's presence meant, what Claire's presence meant. The letter he'd intercepted 6 years ago, the woman he'd dismissed as an opportunist, the consequences of his interference standing right there in an emerald dress, holding the hand of the granddaughter he'd kept hidden from Logan. Gerald's alarm had shifted rapidly to calculation. Luna could see him thinking, trying to figure out how to manage this situation, how to contain the damage, how to spin this newest complication into something controllable, but it was too late for management, too late for containment. Luna had already detonated the truth Gerald had worked so hard to bury. The music had continued playing. Couples continued dancing. But in the space around Luna, Logan and Gerald, everything had gone still. The people nearby had noticed something significant was happening. The VP of Vanguard Industries stood, frozen, staring at a cleaning lady and a child, while the CEO looked like he'd been caught in a crime. The whispers had intensified, spreading through the ballroom like wildfire. People were connecting dots, making assumptions, creating narratives to explain what they were witnessing. The gossip would be brutal, Luna knew. By tomorrow, everyone in their social and professional circles would have heard some version of tonight's revelation. But Luna didn't care about gossip, didn't care about reputations or social standing or what people thought. She cared about Claire knowing her father. She cared about Logan finally learning the truth. She cared about Gerald Hastings facing consequences for playing God with other people's lives. The ballroom seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Would Logan approach? Would Gerald intervene? Would Luna say something? The entire room had become an audience to this unfolding drama, though most didn't yet understand what they were watching. Claire had tugged on Luna's hand, sensing the strange tension even if she didn't understand it. "Mama, can we get food now? I'm hungry." The innocent request had broken the spell slightly. Luna had looked down at her daughter, at this perfect small person who had no idea her entire world was about to shift, and had felt a surge of protective love so fierce it was almost painful. "Soon, baby," Luna had murmured. Very soon. She'd looked back up, meeting Logan's eyes across the ballroom once more. He was still frozen, still staring, still processing. But then, slowly, he'd started to move. Started walking toward Luna with the jerky, uncertain movements of someone operating on autopilot, while his mind reeled. The overlooked woman had become visible. The truth was out, and nothing would ever be the same. Logan had started walking toward Luna and Claire with the determined, slightly unsteady gait of someone operating on pure instinct while their minds struggled to catch up. The crowd had parted for him automatically, the way people always made room for executives, for men with power and authority. But this time, there was something different in how they moved aside. They were watching, observing, bearing witness to something that clearly mattered, even if they didn't yet understand what. Luna had stood her ground, one hand still firmly clasping Claire's, the other hanging at her side with fingers slightly curled into a fist. She'd watched Logan cross the ballroom toward them, watched his face cycle through emotions, watched him navigate around dancing couples without seeming to see them. His entire focus had been locked onto Luna and the child beside her. The ballroom's ambient noise had seemed to dim. Conversations had faltered as people noticed Logan Price, normally so composed, so controlled, walking with obvious emotional distress etched across his features. The whispers had intensified, speculation spreading faster than truth ever could. What's happening? Who is that woman? Why does Logan look like that? Is that his child? Luna had felt the weight of dozens, maybe hundreds of eyes on them. The entire gala had become an audience to this private moment made devastatingly public. Part of her had wanted to grab Claire and run, to escape the scrutiny and handle this somewhere more private. But the larger part had held firm. She'd come here to be seen. This was exactly what she'd wanted, truth exposed in the light, impossible to dismiss or hide. Miranda Colton had followed a few steps behind Logan, her elegant features arranged in polite confusion. She'd been reaching for his arm, clearly trying to understand what had caused his dramatic reaction. "Logan, what's going on? Who is that woman?" Logan hadn't answered her, hadn't even acknowledged she'd spoken. His entire world had narrowed to the woman and child standing near the ballroom entrance. Gerald Hastings had been moving too, pushing through the crowd with less grace than Logan, but more urgency. Gerald's face had been a mask of controlled alarm, the expression of a man watching his carefully constructed house of cards begin to collapse. He'd been trying to intercept Logan, one hand outstretched as if he could physically prevent what was about to happen. "Logan, wait," Gerald had called, his voice carrying that particular tone of authority he used when managing crises. "Let's not make a scene. We can discuss this privately." But Logan had brushed past Gerald's reaching hand without slowing, without looking back, without giving any indication he'd even heard. Gerald had been left standing awkwardly in Logan's wake, his authority suddenly meaningless, his ability to control the situation evaporating in real time. Luna had watched Gerald's face shift from alarm to calculation to something approaching panic. He'd known exactly what was about to happen, known that 6 years of carefully maintained deception was about to explode in front of Vanguard Industries board members, major clients, and half of the city's business elite. Logan had stopped about 3 feet from Luna, close enough to see her clearly but maintaining the distance of someone who wasn't sure he had the right to come closer. Up close, Luna could see the fine tremor in his hands, the way his chest rose and fell with rapid, shallow breaths, the sheen of tears gathering in his eyes. Luna. His voice had cracked on her name, broken and questioning. Luna Thorne. The use of her maiden name had hit Luna with unexpected force. He'd remembered her full name. After 6 years, after everything, he'd remembered exactly who she'd been. Luna had lifted her chin slightly, meeting his gaze directly. "It's Luna Rhodes now," she'd said, her voice steady despite the emotional earthquake happening inside her chest. "I changed it legally 4 years ago." Logan had flinched like she'd struck him. The details about the name change had seemed to carry weight, evidence of how thoroughly Luna had moved on, how completely she'd rebuilt her life without him in it. "I don't understand," Logan had said, his eyes moving between Luna's face and Claire's, unable to settle on either for long. "How are you here? Why are you—" His voice had trailed off as his gaze had locked onto Claire again, and the incomplete question had hung in the air. Luna had watched Logan do the mathematics, watching his gaze trace Claire's features, the grey-blue eyes that mirrored his own, the stubborn set of her jaw, the shape of her face that blended Luna's features with his. Watched him count backward from Claire's apparent age, landing somewhere around 6 years ago, landing exactly on the night of the last Vanguard Gala. The night they'd met, the night they'd connected, the night everything had changed. Logan's face had gone through several rapid transformations, disbelief warring, with growing certainty, hope battling with fear, wonder mixed with devastation. His hand had come up to his mouth as if to hold back words or sobs or both. "Is she—" He'd started the question but couldn't finish it, the words too enormous to push past his lips. The incomplete question had hung between them, weighted with 6 years of separation and possibility. Logan's eyes had been pleading for confirmation, for denial, for any answer that would make sense of what he was seeing. Luna had taken a breath, feeling the moment crystallize around them. Everything she'd planned to say, all the speeches she'd rehearsed in her mind over the past 2 weeks, none of it had felt adequate for this moment. So she'd gone with simple truth, spoken calmly and clearly enough that everyone within earshot would hear and understand. "Her name is Claire," Luna had said, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent section of the ballroom surrounding them. "She's 5 years old, and yes, Logan, she's yours." The words had landed like physical blows. Luna had watched Logan absorb them, watched his face crumble and reform, watched tears spill over onto his cheeks without him seeming to notice or care. Around them, the whispers had exploded into actual conversation, shocked exclamations, gasps, the rustle of people pulling out phones to text this development to contacts who weren't present. Logan had made a sound somewhere between a sob and a laugh, his hand still pressed to his mouth. His eyes had moved to Claire again, drinking in detail with desperate intensity. 5 years old, he'd repeated numbly. Claire. Claire had looked up at Luna, thoroughly confused now. "Mama, what's happening? Why is the man crying?" Before Luna could answer, Logan had dropped to his knees. The movement had been sudden and uncontrolled, like his legs had simply stopped supporting him. He'd knelt on the polished ballroom floor in his expensive tuxedo, putting himself. At Claire's eye level, tears streaming down his face as he'd stared at his daughter. "Why didn't you tell me?" Logan's voice had been raw, broken. "I never knew. Luna, I swear to you, I never knew. If I had known, if anyone had told me, I would have—" He'd broken off, unable to complete the thought, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he'd missed. Luna had felt her carefully maintained composure start to crack. 6 years of hurt had risen in her throat, threatening to choke her. But she'd pushed it down, channeled it into controlled fury instead of breaking down. "You never knew," Luna had repeated, her voice sharp enough to cut. "You never knew because you chose not to know." "No," Logan had shaken his head violently. "No, I didn't choose. I never received any." "I tried to reach you," Luna had interrupted, her control slipping slightly, emotion bleeding into her words. "After you disappeared. After your phone was disconnected and your emails bounced and security turned me away like I was some kind of stalker. I tried, Logan." Luna's hands had been trembling now, despite her best efforts to remain composed. Claire had been watching with wide, frightened eyes, clearly picking up on the intensity of emotions swirling around her, even if she didn't understand their source. "I sent you a letter," Luna had continued, her voice tight with barely contained rage. "A handwritten letter explaining everything, that I was pregnant, that I needed help, that I just wanted you to know you were going to be a father. I included my contact information, a copy of the pregnancy test, everything you would have needed to reach me." Logan had been shaking his head, confusion written across his features. "I never received any letter." "Luna, I swear." It came back. Luna had cut him off, her words precise and devastating. "Returned to sender. Unopened." With a typed note attached saying you were engaged to be married and wanted no further contact. The note said any additional attempts to reach you would be considered harassment and handled accordingly. The color that had returned to Logan's face had drained away again. "What?" "Your rejection wasn't even personal enough to be handwritten," Luna had said, the old hurt breaking through her controlled exterior. "It was typed, professional, like I was a business problem that needed managing rather than a person you'd spent the night with. A person who was carrying your child." Logan had been silent for a long moment, processing what Luna had just revealed. Then, his expression had shifted. Confusion transforming into dawning. Realization hardening into something cold and furious. His head had turned slowly, his gaze cutting across the ballroom to where Gerald Hastings stood frozen, watching the confrontation unfold. "Gerald," Logan had said, his voice low and dangerous. "What did you do?" Gerald had attempted to maintain his composure, but Luna had seen the guilt flash across his face before he could mask it. That momentary expression had been all the confirmation anyone needed. "I never got a letter," Logan had said, his voice breaking. "I never knew she was pregnant. I never knew I had a daughter." "Gerald, what the hell did you do?" The repetition had carried the weight of Logan's shattering world. Everything he'd believed about the past 6 years, every assumption he'd made, every conclusion he'd drawn, all of it had been built on lies, on interference he'd never suspected, on decisions made by someone he'd trusted completely. Gerald had drawn himself up, attempting to reclaim authority through posture even as his position collapsed around him. "I made a judgment call," he'd said, his voice defensive. "You were 26 years old, just starting your career. A woman you'd known for one night claimed to be pregnant. It was an obvious attempt to..." "To what?" Logan had interrupted, his voice shaking with rage. "To inform me that I was going to be a father. To give me a choice about how to handle it. To let me take responsibility for my own actions. To trap you," Gerald had snapped, dropping the pretense of calm. "To derail your future. To saddle you with obligations that would have destroyed your career before it began. I was protecting you from a gold digger who saw an opportunity." "She's not a gold digger," Logan had roared, taking a step toward Gerald. She was." He'd broken off, unable to articulate everything Luna had meant to him, everything she apparently still meant. "I intercepted the letter," Gerald had admitted, his tone shifting to righteous justification. "Yes. I made that decision for your own good. You were too young and too naive to see what she was doing. A single night together and suddenly she's pregnant? Conveniently needing money just as your career is taking off. I've seen it 100 times, Logan. Women targeting successful men, trying to secure their futures through pregnancy. You had no right, Logan had said, his voice dangerously quiet now. No right to make that decision. No right to intercept my mail. No right to deny me knowledge of my own child. I had every right as your mentor, Gerald had countered, as someone who cares about your future. As someone who'd seen young men with promise destroyed by exactly this kind of situation. I was protecting you. You were playing God with my life. Logan had shouted. You decided what I should know, what I should feel, what I should do. You stole 6 years from me, 6 years of my daughter's life that I can never get back. And you did it while convinced you were helping me? The fury in Logan's voice had been matched by devastating grief. He'd turned back to look at Claire, at this 5-year-old child who was his daughter, and his face had crumpled. 6 years, he'd whispered. She's 5 years old. I missed everything. Her birth, her first words, her first steps, birthdays, every milestone, everything. Luna had felt her own rage at Gerald crystallize into something harder and colder. He'd done this. He'd stolen those years from Logan, yes. But he'd also stolen Luna's chance to co-parent with someone who might have wanted to be involved. He'd condemned Claire to grow up without a father because he'd decided he knew better than everyone else what was right. You had no right, Luna had said, her voice cutting through the charged atmosphere. You had no right to make that choice for either of us. You intercepted a letter that wasn't addressed to you, containing information that wasn't yours to withhold. You violated my privacy, Logan's autonomy, and Claire's right to know her father, and you did it all while convincing yourself you were the hero of this story. Gerald had opened his mouth to respond, but Luna hadn't been finished. But here's what you need to understand, Gerald, Luna continued, her voice strong and clear. I didn't come here tonight for Logan's money. I didn't come seeking recognition or support or anything else you assumed a gold digger would want. I came to show him exactly what he missed, what you made him miss. Luna had gestured to Claire, who'd been pressed against her side, confused, and overwhelmed but safe in her mother's protective presence. This remarkable, brilliant, beautiful child exists. She's grown up loved and cared for without Logan's financial support, without his name, without anything from him except the features on her face. I built a life for us, a good life. Logan had been staring at Claire with such raw longing that Luna had almost felt sorry for him. Almost. In fact, Luna had continued, riding the wave of her own fierce pride, I've built more than just a life. I've built a business. Green Solutions, a consulting firm specializing in sustainable building management. Maybe you've heard of it. We're currently working with Riverside Development Corporation on a major portfolio-wide contract. Gerald's expression had shifted to shock. Logan had looked confused, still too emotionally overwhelmed to process what Luna was saying. And you should know, Luna had said, a sharp smile crossing her face, that we're planning to submit a proposal for Vanguard Industries' upcoming building management RFP. The cleaning lady who you overlooked for 3 years might soon be your vendor. Someone you'll have to negotiate with as an equal. Someone whose expertise you'll have to acknowledge and value. The irony had been delicious. Luna had seen it land, seen Gerald's face reflect the realization that the woman he'd dismissed as an opportunist had built actual success, had become actual competition, had done everything he'd assumed she was incapable of. Luna had turned back to Logan, softening her tone slightly. I didn't need you to build a life, Logan. I needed you to be a father. There's a difference. I would have welcomed your involvement, your support, your presence in Claire's life, but I didn't require it to survive. Claire and I, we're fine. We're more than fine. Logan had looked like Luna had struck him. I would have been there, he'd said, his voice choking. If I'd known, if anyone had told me, I would have been there for everything. I've spent 3 months tearing myself apart, wondering if there were children I didn't know about, if I'd abandoned responsibilities without realizing it, and all along, his voice had broken completely. Claire had been increasingly distressed by the tense conversation happening around her. She'd pressed closer to Luna, her small hand gripping her mother's with enough force to hurt slightly. Mama, I don't like this, she'd whispered. Can we go home? The fear in her daughter's voice had cut through Luna's righteous anger. This wasn't about her and Logan and Gerald anymore. This was about Claire, who was scared and confused and didn't understand why adults were angry and crying. Luna had knelt down immediately, bringing herself to Claire's eye level. "It's okay, baby," she'd said gently, brushing hair from Claire's face. "Everything's okay. Sometimes adults have to talk about difficult things, and it can seem scary. But you're safe. I promise." "Why is everyone staring?" Claire had asked, her eyes welling with tears. "Because sometimes people are curious," Luna had replied. "But we don't have to stay if you don't want to. We can leave any time you need to." Logan had knelt down too, positioning himself at Claire's level, but maintaining careful distance. He'd wiped at his face with the back of his hand, trying to compose himself, though tears continued to streak down his cheeks. "Hi, Claire," he'd said, his voice gentle despite shaking with emotion. I'm Logan." Claire had looked at him with cautious curiosity, still pressed against Luna, but slightly less frightened now that the adults weren't shouting. "Why are you crying?" she'd asked with the direct honesty of children. Logan had let out a sound between a laugh and a sob. "Because I'm very happy to meet you," he'd said, "and very sad that I didn't get to meet you sooner." Claire had processed this with the seriousness children brought to adult emotions they didn't fully understand. "Mama cries when she's happy sad sometimes too," she'd offered. The observation had made both Logan and Luna flinch. Then Claire had tilted her head, studying Logan's face with the intensity of a 5-year-old making connections. "Are you the prince from Mama's stories?" she'd asked suddenly. Luna's heart had stopped. Logan had looked confused, glancing at Luna for explanation before turning back to Claire. "The prince?" he'd repeated carefully. "The one who got lost." Claire had elaborated. "Mama tells me stories about a prince who got lost and couldn't find his way home. She said maybe someday he'd find the way back." "Is that you?" Luna's carefully maintained composure had cracked completely. She'd told Claire those stories, fairy tales about a prince who'd gotten lost in an enchanted forest, who'd tried to find his way back to someone important, but the path kept changing, who kept searching even when it seemed impossible. Luna had told herself she was just sharing harmless bedtime stories. She hadn't acknowledged, even to herself, that she'd been working through her own feelings, creating a narrative where Logan's absence wasn't rejection but just being lost. A tear had slipped down Luna's cheek. Logan had seen it, and the sight had seemed to break something else inside him. "I was lost," Logan had said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I was lost, and I didn't even know it. But maybe I can find my way back." The last part had been directed at Luna as much as Claire, a question rather than a statement. Claire had considered this seriously. "That would be good," she'd said, with the simple acceptance of children who hadn't yet learned to complicate hope with skepticism. "Mama says lost things can be found if you look hard enough." Logan had let out another sob laugh, covering his face with his hands for a moment. When he'd lowered them, he'd looked at Luna with such raw vulnerability that she'd had to look away. "Luna," Logan had said, straightening up, but staying kneeling so he remained at Claire's level. "I know I have no right to ask this. I know you've built a life without me, that you've been an incredible mother, that Claire is remarkable because of you, not despite my absence. But I'm asking, begging, for a chance to know her, to be part of her life, however that looks, whatever terms you set. I'm not demanding anything. I'm asking for permission to try." The humility in his voice had been genuine. He wasn't invoking parental rights or making threats or acting entitled to instant access to his daughter. He was requesting permission from Luna, acknowledging her authority as Claire's primary parent, offering to earn rather than claim. Luna had looked at him, this man she'd loved briefly and completely 6 years ago, who'd been kept ignorant through no fault of his own, who'd just had his world shattered and was trying to piece together some path forward. "Slow," Luna had said finally. "Everything happens slowly. On Claire's timeline, not yours or mine. You don't get to waltz in and claim father status overnight. You earn it. You show up consistently. You put her needs ahead of your feelings. You prove you're trustworthy before expecting trust. Logan had nodded frantically. Yes. Anything. Whatever you need. Whatever she needs. And therapy, Luna had added. For Claire, probably. Definitely for us, you and me, if we're going to co-parent. We need professional help navigating this because it's complicated and traumatic, and neither of us should pretend we can just figure it out on our own. Agreed, Logan had said immediately. And you need to understand, Luna had continued, her voice hardening slightly, that I am her mother. I've earned that role through 6 years of showing up every single day. Your biological connection doesn't override that. I make the final decisions about her welfare, her schedule, her life. You're asking to be part of that, not take control of it. I understand, Logan had said. I wouldn't want to take anything from you. You've given her everything. I just want the chance to know her, to love her, to be someone she can count on. Logan had stood then, turning to face Gerald, who'd been standing awkwardly on the periphery of the conversation. The rage that crossed Logan's face had been cold and absolute. You're fired, Logan had said flatly. Gerald had paled. Logan, you can't. I absolutely can, Logan had interrupted. And I am. I don't care about your position, your connections, your years of service. What you did was unforgivable. You stole 6 years of my daughter's life from me. You made decisions about my personal life that you had no authority to make. You intercepted private mail. You lied to me for 6 years. Consider this your immediate termination. The board won't allow, Gerald had started. The board will absolutely allow it, Logan had said. Because if they don't, I'll go public with what you did. Every media outlet in the city will hear about how Vanguard's CEO intercepted a pregnant woman's letter, sent her threatening legal notes, and kept a man's daughter hidden from him for years. See how that plays for the company's reputation. Gerald's face had cycled through emotions before settling on bitter resignation. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the exit, his departure watched by hundreds of eyes. Miranda Colton had approached cautiously, touching Logan's arm gently. I'm going to go, she'd said quietly. You need space to handle this. I hope everything works out for you. There had been no anger in her voice, no resentment at being publicly abandoned. She'd simply recognized that she was now collateral damage in a much larger story, and she'd chosen to exit gracefully. Logan had looked at her with genuine appreciation. Thank you, Miranda. I'm sorry you got caught up in this. She'd smiled sadly. Not your fault. Good luck, Logan. With everything, she nodded politely to Luna, given Claire a kind smile, and walked away with her head high. The ballroom had been watching everything. Hundreds of people bearing witness as the overlooked cleaning lady had walked in and completely transformed the trajectory of one of Vanguard Industries' most powerful executives, as Luna had revealed truths that shattered carefully maintained images. As Logan Price had gone from composed professional to broken father in the space of minutes. Tomorrow, this would be the only story anyone talked about. The gossip would be brutal and relentless. But tonight, at this moment, Luna felt only a strange sense of completion. She'd come here to be seen. Mission accomplished. We're leaving, Luna had announced, taking Claire's hand. This is too much for her, and it's been a long night. Logan had started, then stopped himself. May I walk you out? I'd like to. I just want a few more minutes. If that's okay, Luna nodded. Together, the three of them had walked toward the exit, Luna and Claire in their matching emerald dresses, Logan in his tuxedo, moving through a crowd that parted and whispered and watched. They weren't reclaiming the past. That was gone, lost to Gerald's interference and missed opportunities. But maybe, just maybe, they were beginning to build something new, something cautious and complicated, but potentially real. Luna took back her power and showed up as her true self tonight. What would you do in her situation? Would you have confronted Logan publicly or privately? Would you have given him a chance, or would the 6 years of hurt have been too much? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear from you. If this story moved you, if Luna's courage inspired you, Hit that subscribe button for Mr. Steele Rich Stories. We've got more powerful narratives coming your way, stories about resilience, transformation, and the strength it takes to rewrite your own ending. And please, share this video with someone who needs a reminder that being overlooked doesn't mean being powerless. Someone who's been underestimated, dismissed, or told they don't matter. Someone who needs to see that you can reclaim your narrative no matter how long you've been silent. As they'd stepped out into the cool November night, Logan had looked at Luna with everything he was feeling written across his face. "Thank you," he'd said simply, "for coming tonight, for telling me, for giving me a chance." Luna had looked up at the sky, at the stars barely visible through city lights, and felt the weight of 6 years finally beginning to lift. "We're not fixed, Logan," she'd said quietly. "This doesn't erase anything that happened. But maybe we can build something good from here." Claire had yawned, exhausted from the long evening. "Can we go home now, Mama?" "Yes, baby," Luna had said, kissing the top of her daughter's head. "We're going home." And as they'd walked toward the waiting car, with Logan following at a respectful distance, Luna had allowed herself something she hadn't felt in 6 years. Not hope exactly, but possibility. The overlooked woman had been seen. The truth was out, and whatever came next would be built on honesty rather than lies. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was a beginning, and sometimes that was enough.